Chapter 251, Plan to Resurrect Minato. After the decision was made, the third Hokage ended the meeting. Just as everyone prepared to leave, they were stopped by Danzo. Hold on. The Hokage's post-issue has indeed been solved, but are we not going to talk about the new Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Everyone heard that, and they immediately turned to the third Hokage. My men have seen Minato splitting the Kyuubi in two. I guess half of it must have been sealed back into Kushina, as she's still with us. But, how about the other half? You should at least tell us who this new Kyuubi Jinchuriki is. After hearing Danzo, the room instantly froze. Everyone had thought that the fourth Hokage had sealed the Kyuubi back in Kushina. They never expected that there would be two Kyuubi. After a long silence, Hayashi Hayaga had to speak. Sandaime-sama, Danzo-san is right. We all have the right to know who our Jinchurikis are. Yes, Sandaime-sama. We should know. As everyone's voices went louder, Kushina's face turned more and more gloomy. She did not want others to know of Naruto's identity, as she wanted him to enjoy a normal childhood. Ne-san, you can't wrap fire with paper. You should tell them about Naruto. Ryo telepathically said to Kushina. Note, you can't wrap fire with paper is a Chinese saying that basically means that great events cannot be hidden forever, and that someone would eventually know. But if Naruto's identity as a Jinchuriki is exposed, it would have a great impact on his growth. Don't worry, we'll be there for him. And Naruto is your and Minato's son, I believe he will get through it. With Ryo's words of support, Kushina gathered enough courage to face the rest of the people in the meeting, and nodded to the third. Hiruzen seemed to be more hesitant than her, taking his time, but then he sighed and said, the new Jinchuriki is the son of Kushina and Minato, who will be known as Uzumaki Naruto. The third pointed to Naruto who was in his mother's arms. This is an S-class secret matter, and no one is allowed to disclose it. He added. Hearing the words of the third, everyone looked at the baby in Kushina's arms with admiration in their eyes. They could see the epitome of what a ninja would have to bear for his village. Not only did Minato sacrifice his own life to save Konoha, he also made his own newborn child a Jinchuriki. They all admired and appreciated his selflessness. Still, their admiration did not take away from their greed. When knowing that the new Jinchuriki was this child, many of them began to feel interested. Kushina could perfectly control Kurama's power, and her child should be able to do the same as well. If he was to be raised in their clans. Of course, most clan heads remained calm, for they knew that this was a dead end. Let's say that this child was destined to become a perfect Jinchuriki, let's suppose anything about what he could bring to their clans, who could dare to try to take this baby from so many cage-tier ninjas. Even Danzo did not dare say anything more after learning that the Jinchuriki was Kushina's baby. Since he is the Yandame's son, I am relieved. Danzo took the lead leaving the conference room, and everyone else followed suit right after him. After leaving, Sakumo and the others went to Kushina's place. Back in the conference, Ryo urged them to go against electing a new Hokage for a reason that he did not disclose. He promised to tell them everything later, and they decided to trust him. Now, they all went to Kushina's place to know the truth. Ryo, what was the reason behind your request? Sakumo asked. Very simply, it's because in a few years, Minato ni-san will be back. Ryo said those words so casually, but they hit everyone like a bag of bricks. They never expected that this could be Ryo's reason. Minato will. No. This is impossible. I have seen Minato's body with my own eyes. Jiraiya was agitated, feeling lost in a storm of hope, frustration and disbelief. Well, please don't resist this. Saying that, Ryo opened his mangekyou, and pulled everyone's soul into the ice world. The sudden change of the surrounding scenery took everyone by surprise. Ryo immediately explained to them, this is my mangekyou's ability, Ice World. This is a space made out of spiritual power and natural energy, one that resides between illusion and reality. Ryo, why did you bring us here? Is Minato here? Jiraiya hastily asked. Calm down Jiraiya-san, I'll tell you everything. Now, only your souls are actually in here, not your bodies. In this world, I also have ni-san's soul. Ryo walked with the group in front of an igloo. This one was holding Minato's soul. As for Yahiko's, it was hidden by Ryo, who controlled everything inside this world and did not want to expose Yahiko's death. With a snap of his fingers, the igloo disappeared, and Minato's soul appeared before everyone. Ni-san used the dead demon consuming seal to seal the Kyuubi. This technique absorbed all of his chakra and vitality, and just when it was absorbing his soul, I used my Mangekyo and saved it. Ryo-kun, are you thinking of creating a body for Minato? Orochimaru was the first to guess Ryo's intentions. Ryo nodded, yes, I intend to use the cloning technology and make him a new body. With that, I could save Ni-san. Cloning? What's that? Besides Orochimaru, everyone was dumbfounded. Ryo told them all about cells and cloning. Although they didn't get much of Ryo's scientific jargon, they all had a vague idea about the concept of cloning in mind. After understanding the plan, Sakumo asked, how long should this take? I don't want to be a Hokage substitute for too long. That depends on how fast Orochi-san's research progresses. All of our previous prototypes had their fair share of problems, and they can't be used for Ni-san's resurrection. After that, most of them had questions about details, and Ryo answered them one by one. In the end, everyone fully understood Ryo's plan, and the latter took them back to the real world. The next day, the new Hokage substitute officially took office. With him in charge, Konoha was on track for being reconstructed in an orderly manner. At everyone's request, Orochimaru put his White Zetsu research on hold to focus fully on cloning technology. Jiraiya also left on the same day. Whenever asked, he said he was going to do research for his next book while in fact, he was just looking for clues on the masked man. As for Kushina, she quickly cheered up. All that mattered to her was to be there for Naruto and to let him have a happy childhood. After all, Minato had to find a well-raised son when he returns. As for Ryo, he began repairing and healing Minato's soul along with Korin. Using the dead demon consuming seal had its great toll on the young Hokage's soul. That was topped off with extra damage caused by Ryo's battle with the Shinigami. Just repairing the soul turned out to an extremely difficult job. While none speaks of the good, the bad spread to the horizons. The news of a Kyuubi attack inside Konoha that caused heavy losses quickly spread throughout the world. All villages that received the news were eager to make a move, especially the Hidden Cloud, who lost only to Konoha during the Third Shinobi World War. The spies of the various villages flocked and began to sneak into Konoha. Chapter 252, The Cloud's Spy. The little pokes of the other villages did not affect the reconstruction Konoha. None of the many spies trying to access the village could enter. Spies are usually weaker ninjas. Such people are less remarkable, so they find it easier to infiltrate into villages. With this in mind, Sakumo allowed the Uchihas to use genjutsu on outsiders entering the village, all while sending the Umbu to observe the borders. This method was simple and crude, and made most civilians entering the village very dissatisfied. However, Konoha was in a very bad state. If these spies were to be allowed in, the vulnerability of the village would be made public, and the consequences would be disastrous. In just 2 days, the Uchiha captured dozens of spies from various villages. Over half of them were from the Hidden Cloud. In the Hokage's office, Sakumo looked at the reports on his table and sneered, the cloud can really hold a grudge. He looked at an Umbu by his side and said, go find the Sandaime and Ryo Yamanaka. After a while, Ryo teleported to the office, and the third also arrived. Sakumo handed them both the information on his table. After the two read the reports, the 3RD's face was very serious, while Ryo smiled, having the same first impression as Sakumo. Sakumo, I think this must be handled with care. The Hidden Cloud are not to be underestimated. Right now, we should be able to go to war against them. Hearing the third, Sakumo nodded, I think so as well. However, with all the spies that they are sending, dealing with this is not going to be simple. Ryo looked at the two and said, you're both being too nervous. They are hesitating, not knowing the true state of Konoha. If we start acting too abnormally, they would become sure that we are in a bad state. The third immediately answered, what Ryo's saying also makes sense. However, we can't just do nothing. We must have some sort of response, or else the cloud would end up finding that out on their own. After taking the time to think, Sakumo said, what do you think of dispatching extra Hyaga and Aberme ninjas to cover the entirety of Konoha's borders? The third smiled and nodded, that should be enough. While the Hyaga and the Aberme ninjas are very good at investigating, their usual surveillance group might find it hard to cover all the borders. With more of them, however, they shouldn't miss anything. I think that should be fine too for the time being. If not, I will personally pay a visit to the Hidden Cloud. Ryo now was no longer the same. With the help of Korin, he could maintain Ice Colossus indefinitely. He was confident that even the hidden cloud should not be able to stop him if he went rampaging in their village. Sakumo and the third also understood how powerful Ryo had become, and his words made them feel a lot more at ease. This way, according to their plan, the Aberme and Hyoga clans dispatched over 20 more ninjas to watch the borders. The hidden cloud's spies were not returning, and this made the fourth Hokage very anxious. The wild world was at Konoha's gates because of the Kyuubi's attack, and there were even rumors that the fourth Hokage had died on that night. It was clear to the fourth Hokage that this was a rare opportunity for revenge, but while very impulsive, A was not stupid. He couldn't risk the lives of his ninjas without having the rumors confirmed. Hokage-sama, we have sent many spies, but we are getting no information back. Should we really continue? Dode said to A. Continue sending them. We will get intelligence soon or later. I must know what happened in Konoha. Yes, Hokage-sama. Dode knew all too well about A's temper, and did not object. What the fourth did not expect this time was that the spies he sent next returned with the news. He did expect Konoha's border protection to waver, but not so soon. As soon as the intelligence scroll fell on his desk, he eagerly opened it and browsed through it. The first thing that was noted was that the death of Minato was indeed a fact. A became excited, but as he went on to read the rest, his face became more and more gloomy. Hey! A finally looked up. Dode, inform the troops to cancel all the plans for Konoha. Cancel? Hokage-sama, why? Dode was very surprised. A had been planning for this invasion for so long. Him giving up on it was strange. Check out for yourself why. The fourth gave the scroll to Dode. After the later read through it, his face changed greatly. Immediately, he executed A's command. The scroll very simply said that, the fourth Hokage died in order to seal the Kyuubi. However, the one to subdue the Kyuubi for sealing was actually Ryo Yamanaka, who managed to do it very quickly. A sighed in frustration. He knew the spy to send the information, and it was absolutely credible to him. He had seen the Kyuubi on the battlefield before, manhandling both the Hakubi and the Nibi. He knew all about its horrifying power, and never expected that Ryo Yamanaka would be able to subdue the Kyuubi on his own. Facing such a powerful emerging cage tier, the fourth Hokage could not afford to get his village to go against Konoha, and could only choose to give up. Back in Konoha, the guards caught no spies from the hidden cloud for a few days, and Sakumo finally felt relieved. It seems that Ryo's plan was a success. The story started a few days ago when the Uchiha, as usual, were checking the civilians entering Konoha. However, one man who was never checked pretended to be under the effect of genjutsu, and stumbled his way through the barrier. A Hyoga member of the Umbu noticed him and immediately reported it to Sakumo. With his Byakugan, he could clearly see that the man's chakra was not disturbed in any way, he was obviously faking it. Sakumo immediately sent another one of his Umbu to track the spy, all while notifying Ryo and the third. After learning about the matter, Ryo used genjutsu and his clan's techniques, altering this spy's memories, and planting clues that prove that Ryo had subdued the Kyuubi on his own. From this man's memories, Ryo learned that his name was Kian, a spy who is extremely trusted by A. He had great camouflage and detection abilities. He was perfect to fool the fourth Hokage, which was why Ryo planed the fake memories in his mind, and then left him in a hotel in Konoha. Doing so, Ryo effectively stopped the Cloud Village from waging an all-out war on Konoha. Chapter 253, Confession. After dealing with the Cloud's problem, Ryo and Korin devoted themselves to working on repairing Minato's soul. With Korin's help, the progress of the process went a lot faster than what Ryo expected, but it still took a little over half a month. After their long efforts, the soul was completely healed, and Minato, who was in the igloo inside Ice World, should now regain his consciousness at any time. Sure enough, a few days later, Minato's soul was awakened, and he looked at the Ice World and the snow around him in sorrow. The last thing he remembered was Ryo screaming, telling him to look at him as he was dying. He then felt himself being pulled, and then... nothing. Looking at the strange world before him, he felt it was rather strange. Now, he should be dead. Was this heaven? Hell? Oh! Minato, you're finally awake. A familiar voice suddenly came from behind him, and he suddenly looked back to find Ryo standing before him. Ryo? What's going on here? Have you died as well? Hearing Minato, Ryo's face went all gloomy. I save your life, and you predict my death in return. Ryo thought. Looking at his face, Minato realized that he might have said something wrong. Ryo was too lazy to complain, and just cut straight to the chase, explaining everything to Minato. As the latter listened, he looked around to the ice world and understood all about the Mangekyo and ice world, and the stuff about cloning and Orochimaru's living corpse reincarnation went over his head. Nevertheless, while he didn't get the details, he understood the basic idea of what Ryo was trying to get through. So that's the plan, Ni-san. For now, you can rest inside my ice world. The best thing you can do is sleep, you can do so indefinitely. After Orochimaru-san nails the cloning technology, you will be revived. Alright, understood. But Ryo, can you let me see Kushina? Yes. The last time she was here, your soul was unconscious, and you didn't know I brought her here. I'll bring her back now, hold on. Ryo returned to the real world and immediately teleported to Kushina's place. Naruto had just fallen asleep, and Kushina, who was holding Minato's photo, suddenly heard knocking on the door. She went to the door, and welcomed Ryo in. He did not waste any time, and said to her, Ni-san, Minato Ni-san is finally awake, and he wants to see you. Hearing this news, Kushina's eyes immediately became red. This was the most important thing she heard ever since she saw that his soul was preserved by Ryo. Anxiously, she nodded, Ryo, take me to see him. Naruto is still asleep. What if he wakes up? Ryo sensed the sleeping Naruto inside the house. I'll just give control over my body to Kurama and let him take care of Naruto. Ryo nodded, and then opened his Mangekyo, pulling Kushina's soul inside his ice world. Inside, Minato and Kushina were finally reunited. The two did not say anything, just holding each other tightly. Ryo looked at the two and couldn't help but admire them and what they had. At the same time, another figure popped up in his head. Minato and Kushina chatted for a while before the latter left. She knew that Minato's soul should rest, so she could only see him for a short time. After she left, Ryo rebuilt the igloo for Minato, who entered to fall asleep inside. After leaving Ice World, the figure Ryo thought of inside did not leave his mind. He helplessly sighed, and then teleported to a place in the sand village, that of Pakura. It was peacetime, and Pakura was working at the Hokage's office. She however was home, and she heard movement downstairs. Carefully, she walked down the stairs, only to sigh helplessly at Ryo's sight. Please. How many times have I told you already, this place has a door? Hearing she, Ryo was a little embarrassed and scratched his head saying, next time, I'll be sure to knock. It was not the first time she heard this, and she knew, it certainly wasn't going to be the last. She coldly turned around, paying Ryo no attention. Soon, it was dinner time. Pakura attached great importance to time with her sister, especially after losing her for many years. No matter how much she would be busy at work, she would return every day to have meals with her on time. Today is no exception, but what Pakura did not expect was that she would find Ryo on the dinner table. Ever since she gave her a hint, Pakura had been thinking of Ryo while he was far away. Today, as she finally saw him again, the accumulation of her thoughts made her feel something she never felt before. Ryo sat in place, trying to speak. However, Pakura managed to adjust her voice and speak first, what brings you here, is there something wrong? Nothing. I just came to pay you a visit. Ryo was unusually flustered. Pakura smiled and did not ask him again. After washing her hands, she sat down next to she and ate her dinner. After the meal, Ryo watched her washing the dishes with she, when suddenly, he saw Minato and Kushina standing in their place and then, the two were replaced by him and Pakura. He was shocked by the thoughts in his mind. Now he knew, he liked her. He really liked her. Feeling Ryo's burning gaze behind her back, Pakura felt uncomfortable and wanted to complain about it. However, she pulled her hand. Her sister shook her head, and Pakura was stunned and refrained from saying what she wanted. All night long, Pakura could feel Ryo's eyes following her wherever she went around the house, and just tried to pretend that she did not notice. It became late, but Ryo did not seem to have any intention to go. Pakura did not tell him to leave either. A few minutes later, Ryo suddenly stood up, and walked reluctantly to Pakura. He took her hand, and then teleported with her to the waterfall country. What did you bring me here for? Pakura looked at the dazzling surrounding environment, and remembered that this was where she helped Ryo seal the Nanabe. Ryo was embarrassed, scratching his head. He never was in such a situation before, so he could only directly say what's on his mind. Pakura, I think I like you. Pakura never expected to hear those words on this night. Her mind went blank, her legs went weak, and the face became red. Ryo had no experience with love, but he was sure that he really liked her. Pakura was also very fond of Ryo. In fact, she did want to break the ice between them, but Ryo's words were too sudden. Not only did he break the ice, he broke her mind as well. After a long time, Pakura finally recovered from her crash. She stealthily turned her eyes to Ryo, just to find him still staring at her. Their eyes met, and Pakura instinctively wanted to look away, but Ryo stepped forward, and very strongly held her. In his arms, Pakura's heart gradually calmed down. After a moment of hesitation, she gathered her courage and said, Ryo, I like you too. Hearing her answer, Ryo was very excited. Under the moonlight, the two finally came together. Chapter 254, The Uchiha's Situation. While Ryo and Pakura kissed under the moonlight in the waterfall country, Danzo and the two counselors came to the 3RDS place. Here is inside. He had already guessed that they were coming soon or later and even guessed why they would. The first thing that Danzo said was, Hiruzen, I want to talk to you about the Uchiha clan. Danzo looked dead serious as he talked to the third. The latter looked at Koharu and Homura, and found that they looked at him very seriously as well. Hiruzen, it seems like you have already thought of what we came to ask you about, so let's not waste time. What do you think about this matter? Homura asked. Yes, things ended up very badly on that night. I've asked Ryo Yamanaka about what happened to the Kyuubi, and he told me that it was controlled. Danzo pretended to be surprised by the 3RDS answer, and puffed coldly, oh. I knew it was them, those damn Uchiha. The third frowned, Danzo, we have no proof of such a thing, so you can't say so. What else is there to check? In all recorded history, only the Uchiha could control the Kyuubi. Well, that Ryo Yamanaka has Madara's eye as well, so he should be able of causing what happened on that NI. Enough Danzo. This matter has absolutely nothing to do with Ryo. And you're taking your suspicion of the Uchiha too far without having a shred of evidence. The third immediately interrupted Danzo. Hiruzen, don't be mad. He's only making a reasonable speculation. We all heard Tobirama-sensei, nothing is more terrible than a Mangekyo Sharinan. Homura quickly tried to calm the third down. Hiruzen, I hope you are going to take action and investigate the Uchiha. This time, we've lost the fourth Hokage himself. Koharu also interfered. The third nodded and said, you can rest assured Koharu, I've already done that before you even came to me. And? Did you find out anything? Homura asked after hearing the third. Well, according to the Umbu, the current Uchiha clan has no Mangekyo Sharinan wielders. As for the normal Sharinan, it could never control the Kyuubi on its own. The third Hokage answered. Maybe they are hiding them. Sarutobi, I want to restore Root. If you can't find anything with your Umbu, then just leave it to me. Danzo's real intent was restoring Root, and the third knew that. After some hesitation, he told him that he had no problem with him restoring Root to a level where it could function at a basic level, but also said that the choice was not his, it was Sakumo's. Danzo was not convinced with the 3RDS words, what did Sakumo have to do with this? He thought, but Sarutobi's approval was all he wanted. He left, followed by Homura. As for Koharu, she remained with the third for a while, discussing the future of Konoha. The next day, the third went to the Hokage's office to ask Sakumo for permission to re-establish Root. No. I won't agree. I will not allow a person who would secretly collaborate with the Rain to have such power. Sakumo immediately refused. The third had worked with Danzo for so many years, and had always believed in his loyalty to Konoha. Sakumo, trust me, Danzo would never go against Konoha. I was thinking, if Root were still there under his leadership, wouldn't our losses have been less great on the night the Kyuubi attacked? Their existence has its value. Sakumo remained silent. The third did mention an objective fact. Although he could not stand Danzo, his Root were stronger on average than the Umbu because of his brutal methods. As the third felt that Sakumo was starting to loosen up, he immediately said, Sakumo, you know that the Kyubi was controlled on that night. To our knowledge, there is no way to control it but with a Mangekyo Sharinon. Some could argue that the Uchiha's link to this needs to be investigated, and having root back would balance out the scale against their force, and could help us find out the truth. After a long silence, Sakumo said with all respect, Sandaime-sama, I have thought this through, and I still will not agree to this. As he said all he had, the third could only sigh and leave the office. Danzo on the other hand had no interest in knowing Sakumo's opinion, he already had many of his root members lurking among the 3RDS Umbu, and with his approval, he recalled them in large numbers, and re-established root in secret. The first task he gave them was to monitor the Uchiha clan. While they were at it, he also instructed them to spread the rumor that the Kyubi was controlled on the night of the attack, and that the one who did it was an Uchiha. His main purpose was to create conflict between the village and the Uchiha, preparing for their eventual eradication. Soon, the news spread out throughout Konoha, and the Uchiha clan became the target of massive propaganda. Being as prideful as they were, the Uchiha obviously did not try to clear out the confusion. This led to making Konoha's ninjas and villagers more and more convinced of the rumor. Hatred spread out across the village, and some even began to deliberately disrupt the missions of the Uchiha's police department. Obviously, the Uchiha weren't about to let this pass, and immediately arrested anyone who broke the law. This was the final straw, and the misguided people of Konoha became full of hatred against the Uchiha. They became more agitated and caused even more trouble. Being the biggest clan in Konoha, the Uchiha would not yield, and they carried on catching all these violators. In just a few days, Konoha's prison became overcrowded. While the villagers and ninjas had to admit the Uchiha's power, their hatred made them believe that these arrests were just a manifestation of the Uchiha's guilty conscience. In the Uchiha's district, Fugaku announced a high-level clan meeting. When they met, he went on to explain the status quo, suggesting that they should explain matter to the villagers. However, nobody seemed to care. To them, this was just the idiocy of the other people in Konoha. All they suggested was for the police to continue arresting any violators of law, to let people understand that the Uchiha clan is not to be messed with. Fugaku could only sigh and announce the end of the meeting. Do you think that arresting more could make them retreat? This will only drive us into a corner. He muttered to himself. Chapter 255, New Purpose. A few days later, after spending a week in the Sand Village, Ryo finally returned to Konoha. Being now in a relationship with Pakura, he was very reluctant to leave, and he had to spend a few more days at her place. Upon returning to Konoha, Ryo could sense the strong animosity in the village. From time to time, he noticed that the villagers would glare at the patrolling Uchiha. Then, he saw some of the Uchiha guards carrying some civilians and ninjas in the direction of Konoha's prison. Ryo was somewhat confused, and immediately teleported to the Hokage's office to ask Sakumo about the matter. Ryo, where have been all these days? As soon as Ryo stepped foot in the office, Sakumo asked him where he was. Cough, I went out to have some fun. I had fun for a few days. You are still in the mood to have fun? Konoha is a mess right now, said Sakumo as he handed Ryo a scroll. After reading it, Ryo's face changed greatly. I thought that the mood between the Uchiha and the rest of the village was strange. So this is what's happening. Sakumo sighed, yes, the rumors that the Uchiha controlled the Kyubi on that night have spread through Konoha overnight, and my people didn't have time to react. Ryo was a little surprised, and then he asked, overnight? Sakumo-san, did you find out who started the rumors? Who did it? Sakumo shook his head, he had sent some Umbu to investigate, but in vain. So, someone is deliberately trying to hurt the Uchiha, and this person has not left any clues behind. Does this ring any bells, Sakumo-san? Ryo said. Well, I think that's him indeed. More coincidentally, just a few days ago, the Sandaime came to me and asked me to permit Danzo to re-establish root, but I refused. Ryo had a cold smile on his face as he said, it seems like some people can't sit still, no matter what the orders are. But where are all of Root's ninjas? I couldn't find a trace of them for so long, Sakumo asked. Go and ask the Sandaime. Around 80% of Root are hiding in his Umbu. I really can't understand why and how he could still trust Danzo. When hearing Ryo, Sakumo immediately realized what he had missed, and ordered one of the Umbu to go to the 3RDS place. After leaving the office, Ryo returned home, and as it was noon, he found that Chins had lunch ready. At the table, Ryo carefully asked, "Mom, if I was to return one day with a woman from a foreign village, would you agree? What brings this topic so suddenly? Do you like a girl from another village?" "Well, I wouldn't mind, but the village might come in the way." The village. Ryo did not have the village's position on his mind. "Of course. I don't need to tell you of how important you are in Konoha right now, so many people would not accept you marrying a foreign girl. And if the girl is comparable to you in status, I would advise that you just give up on having such an idea." "Why?" Ryo couldn't guess Chins's reason. Chins smiled and said, "Silly child, even ordinary ninjas from another village would get the village on guard, let alone a high-level ninja marrying one of the pillars of Konoha. To let you marry her, they would at least seal her chakra, and then have her under Umbu surveillance 24/7. I want to remain in your life, Ryo, and I don't want to be watched for life." After listening to Chins, Ryo remained silent. He had not considered these problems, imagining that things would go as smoothly as they went with Shikamaru and Temari in the manga. After Naruto became Hokage, Shikamaru Nara was his right hand in the village. As for Temari, she was Gaara, the Kozakige's sister, and had a great status in the sand as well. Those two had things going for them, and they married happily. Why did he have to bear so many obstacles? "Ryo, you don't really like a ninja from another village, do you?" asked Chins. With Ryo being lost in thought, he just nodded when hearing Chins's question. Learning that her ever-chaste son had finally liked a girl, Chins's eyes opened wide. She got closer to her son's face and eagerly said, "You do? Who is she?" Hearing Chins, Ryo realized that he had said too much, and facing the excited eyes of his mother, he could only answer with the truth. "Mom, I like she's sister, and the main consultant of the Hokage, Pakura. She also likes me, and I've been with her for the past few days." Pakura of the Scorch Release. The Kozakige's main consultant? "Son, the one you've liked is really..." Chins was lost for words. Just now, she told Ryo that he would be better off not liking some higher-up from another village, just to find out that his love interest was not only the Kozakige's right hand, but also the Hidden Sands hero. "Mom, would it really be hard for me and Pakura to be together?" "Hard? That's an understatement. Pakura is too special. Unless you defect, or the whole world learns how to live together in harmony and peace, marrying the Kozakige's right hand is nothing but a fantasy." Chins talked in a very serious tone. Her words, however, made Ryo's eyes shine brightly. He suddenly understood what the difference between him and Shikamaru was. Seeing how excited Ryo was, Chins panicked. "Ryo, you're not thinking of defecting, are you?" "Of course not. I have too many ties to Konoha, how could I ever defect? I just thought of a way to marry Pakura without anyone objecting." Chins glimpsed at her son and thought of her words, and then said in surprise, "Ryo, you're not thinking?" "Yes, Mom. Thanks for your advice. Starting today, I have a new purpose. I want all the ninja villages to live together in peace." "Ryo, this is insane. Impossible." "How is it impossible? I even know of someone who has done it before, so I can certainly do it again. If not, I could still just beat them all up into living in peace." Chins automatically ignored the latter half and asked in surprise, "Ryo, you just said someone has done it before? Who? I never heard of such a thing ever happening." Ryo smiled and teased his mother, "That's a secret." With Ryo not answering, Chins didn't persist, and the topic of their discussion returned to Pakura. After lunch, Ryo sensed Shisui's position, confirmed he wasn't in the Uchiha's district, and then teleported to where he was. As soon as he appeared, he found a kunao flying his way. Just as he dodged it, other kunao and shuriken came his way one after the other. Only then did Ryo realize that the ones he perceived around Shisui were not only allies, but there were also enemies. He originally intended on learning about the recent situation of the Uchiha clan for him, and did not expect to encounter such a good show. Since he wanted to see his apprentice's progress, Ryo did not attack, leaving him in the circle of enemies with lightning chakra flicker. Seeing the familiar flicker jutsu, Shisui could only complain, "Kind as always, sensei. Finding your disciple surrounded by so many enemies, you just leave. I just want to see if you have been lazy in recent days. Hurry up and get rid of these people, I have something to talk to you about." Shisui pulled a kunao, and answered, "All right, sensei. Just watch." Chapter 256, Ryo's Way. The moment that Shisui pulled out his blade, his whole temperament underwent a great change. His mere presence felt dangerous, as if dealing with him was like messing with a sharp blade. Ryo could sense the chakra of the people around his apprentice. There were over 30 of them, most being Chunin, with 2 Jonin being in the lead. With Shisui being surrounded for quite some time now, he had probably gauged their power well enough as well. Initially, he was worried that his companions would not escape, but Ryo's arrival comforted him. Shisui knew his sensei's character. While he would not hesitate to take life, he would not just watch the innocent die without interfering. With his companions being safe, Shisui could finally attack at ease. Suddenly, his figure became blurred, and then a series of after-images formed a trail going to one of the Jonins. The latter could not even react before his throat was slit by Shisui. Most of the surrounding ninjas were shocked by what they had witnessed. However, being near 30 men, they still had it in them to attack. Witnessing him killing one of their 2 leaders, everyone instinctively threw their weapons, kunous, poisoned needles and shurikens went towards Shisui, who remained standing in front of the dead Jonin. What they did not expect was that these hidden weapons would just go through Shisui, as if hitting a mere shadow. As they were still stunned, Shisui himself jumped from one of the other shadows, targeting the other Jonin. The latter was still frightened by everything that had just happened, and did not put up any resistance. With their leaders gone, what remained of the enemy team was of no threat to Shisui, and the battle turned into a one-sided slaughter. Good job, you've made great progress, especially on your after-image technique. Your shadow seems so realistic now, you haven't been too lazy after all. Ryo was very satisfied with Shisui's performance. It's all sensei's teaching. Shisui smiled, a bit embarrassed. Not rejecting flattery, Ryo nodded and smiled. This kid knew by now how to play on his ego. After chatting for a while, the apprentice went to the point saying, "Oh, by the way, why did you come looking for me, sensei? Don't worry about that. Complete your mission for now, and I will wait for you at the 3rd training ground." Shisui nodded, and began to pack the corpses of his enemies into scrolls to take them to Konoha before leaving. Meanwhile, Ryo went to the 3rd training ground. A few hours later, he heard, "Sensei. I'm here." He left time for the rushing Shisui to catch his breath, before saying, "Shisui, some civilians and ninjas in the village have been in this conflict with the Uchiha clan. I thought you should probably already know about it, and I was curious about your thoughts on the matter." Shisui was not expecting the question, but he had nothing to hide. "Most of my clan is not taking this matter to heart. To them, these are just jealous people, ones to be ignored if calm, and arrested if causing trouble." "And what do you think?" Ryo continued to ask. After a few moments of thought, Shisui replied, "I'm actually against what's going on. This method will only further intensify the problems that the village has with the Uchiha." Fugaku-san also thinks the same and had even called for a clan meeting about the matter. Hearing that Shisui and Fugaku did not think like the rest of the Uchiha, Ryo was secretly relieved. At least, there were a few people in the clan who were sane. After thinking about it, Ryo decided to talk to Fugaku before making any move. At night, Shisui stopped by Fugaku's place with a scroll that Ryo gave to him. At this time, Fugaku was troubled by the conflict going on in the village, and was a few words when addressing Shisui. The latter could tell that his clan's head was really not in the mood for a chat, so he just delivered the scroll and left. Watching Shisui leave, Fugaku opened the scroll, quickly browsing through it, just to frown. The scroll was an invitation to him to come to the Naka shrine at night. After a brief moment of hesitation, he decided to go. After all, this was an invitation from Ryo. Soon after, he arrived at the shrine, and found Ryo waiting for him. "Ryo, what's the matter? Why did you bring me here?" Uchiha Fugaku went straight to the point. Ryo was also too lazy to talk nonsense. "I want to talk to you, Fugaku-san, about the situation of the Uchiha in the village." "What about it?" "It's about the recent conflict. I don't think it's now time to determine who is right or wrong. What's done is done, and the clan is already alienated from the rest of the village." Fugaku did not expect Ryo to be so straight about the matter, but he did not argue with him. After all, what Ryo just said was an objective and indisputable fact. "Fugaku-san, I believe your silence means you agree? Well, I guess also you're not finding a good way to deal with this yet, are you? Therefore, why not try my way?" "Your way?" What is your way? Fugaku asked with some doubts. My solution is to move. Get the Uchiha clan to move to the periphery of Konoha. Fugaku's face turned heavy, for Ryo's method was just too bold. However, being the head of his clan, he immediately understood what Ryo's aim was. First, this will allow the Uchihas to have less contact, and thus, less friction with the rest of Konoha. Second, this will give the villagers an illusion of victory over the Uchiha. They would feel like they had joined hands, and defeated the mightiest clan in the village. With such a reward to their efforts, they would be much less persistent when it comes to punishing the Uchiha. The only problem is that the Uchiha clan had been isolated from the center of Konoha before. If they are to be moved again to the periphery of the village, they might not have a chance to ever come back. Ryo knew about Fugaku's worries, but he could not give him any promise that he would get them back. He wanted to help the Uchiha, but they had to make some compromises. Instead of answering directly, Fugaku asked Ryo, "Why do you want to help the Uchiha, Ryo?" Ryo knew that he was going to hear that question. Smiling, he answered, "Well, my father is an Uchiha after all, and the one who's trying to frame your clan is probably an enemy of mine." "Your enemy? Ryo, you already know who's behind this?" Fugaku asked in surprise. "Well, I do have some clues, but I'm not sure yet." Fugaku nodded and did not continue to ask. The conversation between the two ended, and Ryo's figure disappeared into the night, leaving only Fugaku to think about his clan's future. Chapter 257, The Uchiha's Relocation. Throughout the evening, Fugaku thought of Ryo's suggestion, and could think of no other solution. But on the other hand, the Uchiha have been living in the center of the village for so many years, and they would certainly not agree easily to leave. This included Fugaku himself. He had no sleep on that night, but he could not find a way out. In the end, easing the conflict between the villagers and the Uchiha was what mattered most, and Fugaku decided to relocate his clan. The next day, Fugaku shared the idea of moving with the rest of the Uchiha. Obviously, they were all against the idea, and expressed their opposition. However, what surprised Fugaku the most was that Kataki stood up, asked everyone to stop talking, and then was the first to announce his support to the relocation. None of the Uchiha spoke for a while. With the clan's elder and head both agreeing, their opposition lost much of its weight. Nevertheless, their silence also spoke for their sorrow, as they could not just accept leaving their homes in which they've lived for so long without any good reason. "Fugaku Dono, why are we moving? At least tell us why." "Yes, Grand Elder." "Why?" Under the questioning of the clan, Fugaku sighed and decided to tell the truth. However, Kataki did not leave him time to speak. "Obviously, it's for the pride and dignity of the Uchiha clan." Upon hearing that, everyone looked at each other in surprise, not understanding what he meant. "Don't you understand? It's very simple. Our clan is the greatest in Konoha. Recently, the civilians and ninjas of the village have been provoking us. These fools are being used by someone who wants to target our clan. Then why would we want to relocate? Shouldn't we just keep on catching them? Don't be a fool. What's the benefit in that? That would only bring us further down our hidden enemy's trap. We are the Uchiha, how can we ever stoop so low?" Kataki's words moved the pride within the Uchiha's hearts. Just this change of perspective made a portion of them agree to the relocation. Hammering the iron while it's hot, Fugaku added, "Moving away will also allow us to determine the ones conspiring against our clan from behind the scene. If we move, their plans will fail, and they would move on to another. If we are vigilant enough when that happens, we might be able to catch them red-handed. Then, Konoha's center will be wide open for us." After hearing Fugaku's words, the opposition in the clan essentially disappeared, and most of the Uchiha agreed with moving. The few who still did not agree could only bury their complaints. After the meeting, Fugaku stopped Kataki, saying sincerely, "Thank you, Grand Elder. This is about the survival of the Uchiha. I'm not going against you when you go for the right thing. I've been anxiously thinking of what should be done to avoid the conflict between our clan and the rest of the village, and I did not expect you to come up with this solution." Fugaku nodded, and then said, "You've hit the nail on the head back when you mentioned that an enemy of the clan is acting behind the scenes. Do you have any guesses on who that might be?" "I have only speculation. Whoever this is, he's being very secretive. I've sent people to investigate, and they found nothing. However, I think it should be one of two, the Sandaime, or Danzo. Fugaku nodded, as the elder's guess wasn't far off his. Do you agree? Kataki asked. Well, yes. But I think it should be Danzo, not the third. This is more in line with his methods. Those two are both the second Hokage's disciples. He was a senju, and was always hostile to our clan. You should expect the same from his disciples, and you should never trust them. Fugaku did not answer, still feeling that the third had nothing to do with this incident. After that, the two discussed the details of the relocation before they went back to make the necessary preparations. Soon after, in the Hokage's office, Sakumo received an official application for relocation from Fugaku. When reading it, Sakumo could not wait to sign it and agree. After Ryo visited him, his Umbu continued their investigations, and indeed confirmed that the root ninjas were lurking among the 3 RDS Umbu. Now, the Uchiha's relocation was the best possible thing that could possibly happen, as it could ease the conflict and opens ways to counter Danzo. After obtaining Sakumo's approval, the Uchiha immediately began to move. The ninjas remained at first, while the children and the elderly went again of them. Watching the clan move, the civilians of Konoha had much less of a grudge in their hearts. At the same time, Sakumo also took the opportunity to send his Umbu spreading out rumors in the village. The one to control the Kyubi was not an Uchiha. With that news spreading fast, the villagers' conviction of the Uchiha's guilt started to waver. The Uchiha are moving, they had no benefit out of this, and for people able to control the Kyubi itself, they are not putting up resistance. Most of the villagers even started feeling guilt. They had no proof, but they brought too much trouble to the Uchiha. In this way, Konoha regained its calm, and the only one still agitated was probably Danzo. In Root's headquarters, he and Homura were discussing their next move. Counting on their pride, Danzo never expected the Uchiha to actually retreat and relocate. This move rendered all his previous plotting useless. So, we have to find another way to target them? Asked Homura. No. The Uchiha clan is probably ready for our next move. Instead of doing that, we should make our target the son of Minato and Kushina. You mean? Danzo, that's not a good target, not at all. That kid is to become a future pillar of Konoha. If the news is to be spread out, I fear that the other villages might take advantage of that. Don't worry about that kid, he has enough people protecting him to take down any enemy. We should now focus on seizing the opportunity to gain leverage in Konoha and prepare for the election of the Go-Dame. Homura thought about the matter for a while, and then finally nodded. He and Danzo together mobilized their forces, spreading another rumor throughout the village. Hey! Did you hear? The Yondame's son is the tailed fox demon. Is that true? How is that possible? Of course it's true. I heard that when the Yondame died, he sealed the Kyubi into his child's body. Now, that child is the tailed fox demon. Wow! Then we should be careful in the future, and keep our children away from that fox. As the two women were whispering, a man passing by said to them, "How ungrateful could you be? The Yondame put his son's life on the line to seal the Kyubi into his body, and you're out here right now spouting out such nonsense? Like his father, that child should be considered a hero." The man's words made the two women feel ashamed, but did not calm their fear of the Kyubi. A few days later, the villagers and the ninjas of Konoha were divided into two camps. One thought that Naruto should be secluded or separated from the village, and the other camp considered him a boy born a hero worthy of respect. Sakumo naturally learned of the matter, and did not make any comments, letting these people carry on arguing. Chapter 258, Thorough Treatment. The information about Naruto became the hot topic of Konoha, spreading out across the village. After learning of the news, the third went to the Hokage's office angrily to talk to Sakumo. "Sakumo, how could the information about Naruto be allowed to be leaked?" The third directly cut straight to the chase as soon as he entered. "Sandaime, instead of coming here to ask me, you should go ask Danzo who was behind this. It's only out of courtesy to you that I did not just kill that man." The third blinked, and then denied this. "No. It cannot be Danzo. I've told you many times, he might act too rashly, but he would not hurt Konoha. I guess you won't just believe me then. Kakashi, give him the intel." The third took a scroll from Kakashi, and after reading through it, his face went pale and he asked, "This was really Danzo's doing? These are ninjas of Konoha. Is there any evidence?" "Evidence? Those who are dead are not enough evidence? Sandaime, I don't want to talk nonsense with you, just take your time to think about it. The third sighed and walked out of the office. Sakamo looked at his back, and muttered to himself, don't let me lose all hope in you, Sandaime. The third returned to his place, changed into his battle armor, and went to Root's headquarters. At this time, Danzo was furious about half the villagers still siding with Naruto. He felt that such a dangerous existence is to be treated differently, and thought that these villagers are just unreasonable fools. Danzo-sama, the Sandaime is here. The Root ninja wasn't through announcing the 3RD's arrival, when the latter walked in on Danzo. The latter frowned and said with dissatisfaction in his tone, what do you mean by this, Hiruzen? You mean that you don't know? Hiruzen, if you are here because of the matter concerning the Jinchuriki, then let me tell you that I have done nothing wrong. The Kyuubi should be firmly under control. You've been too lenient with Kushina before, and you know how that. Enough, Danzo. The third interrupted Danzo angrily, throwing a scroll that opened up before him. Upon having a glimpse at the contents of the scroll, Danzo's face turned blue. Hiruzen, believe me. This is not me. They are setting me up. Not you? Who else has umbu? Was it me who did this? The 3RD's tone was filled with exhaustion. Sakamo's intel showed him just how much his old pal was willing to hurt Konoha with his root. You're right, Sandaime-sama, you are to blame for all of these things. Upon hearing Ryo's voice, the third glanced behind him, and then asked with some shock, I've never known about any of this. How is this on me? Did you not know, or did you not want to know? You've been always too kind to Danzo, and that kindness is what made him so audacious. Hearing Ryo, the 3RD's face turned more and more pale, until he finally sat on the ground. So, it all my doing, isn't it? Take your time to think about it, Sandaime-sama. Danzo, you've leaked out the identity of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki after the Sandaime made an S-class secret of Konoha. What do you have to say for yourself? Danzo, in cold sweat, screamed and mumbled, not uttering an understandable word. Ryo was too lazy to ask again, and his ice lightning chakram mode broke out. He flickered behind Danzo, and the latter's arm was flying in midair. Sakamo-san left you with one arm too many. Ryo Yamanaka. How dare you? Root, kill him now. Danzo was not through talking when Root swarmed around Ryo, who smiled and said, Danzo, your Root ninjas are mostly Chunin and Jonin, a good reliable force indeed. But killing me? You've lost it, old man, you're asking them for way too much. Ryo's ice lightning chakram mode raged more ferociously. Just as he was about to turn the place into a bloodbath, the third stopped him. Ryo, they are all ninjas of Konoha, some of them are from the Inoshikacho. Please be merciful. Being reminded of the presence of the Inoshikacho ninjas among Root, Ryo just sighed and disappeared from the place. The third sighed, and looked at Danzo with hesitant eyes before leaving. The next day, Sakamo issued an order, making the Jinchuriki's identity a village-wide S-class secret that no one was allowed to discuss or spread. With this order, the debates in Konoha about Naruto stopped quickly. At the same time, Root was disbanded again. However, this time, things were different. The third had a punishment for Danzo this time around. He personally sealed Danzo's chakra, and locked him into Root's headquarters. In the Hokage's office, Sakamo sighed after learning of his choice. He still did not kill him, after all that. Ryo had long guessed that the third would not. It was actually only punished him because of the pressure and guilt he felt for not doing so before. That's already the limit of what he could do. After all, he and Danzo have known each other for a lifetime. In a sense, Danzo was a shadow Sandaime. The third did very well just by doing what he did. From the office, Ryo directly teleported to Orochimaru's lab. Recently, he had not paid attention to Yamato's situation. With him finally having time now, he wanted to see the recent changes that occurred to him. As he entered, Ryo happened to find an interesting unexpected scene. Anko Mitarashi was in the Snake Sage mode, and for a while, it wasn't obvious who would come out on top in her battle against Orochimaru. Ryo hadn't seen her fight for too long, and was surprised to see her grow so fast. Unfortunately, she couldn't maintain Sage mode for too long, and while she was practically on par with Orochimaru when in it, the latter could beat her rather easily when she was out of time. With their battle over, Ryo, who had been watching for a while now, said, Orochi-san, this place is rather small, couldn't fighting here destroy your lab? I just don't want to get out, so I fight carefully here. Well, what are you here for? I'm here to check on Yamato. Lane is ninja school already but he's still the same. It's making me a bit anxious. Ryo walked toward the glassware where Yamato was placed. Oh, he's not exactly the same. In the past few days, he had already woken up once. After that, the speed of the integration of the 1STS cells with his became much faster. I think this should end up being a success as well. Orochimaru said as he excitedly licked his lips. Is that so? Well, I'm still looking forward to see the birth of another wood release using ninja. Chapter 259, Tendo Pain. Yamato was already a few years older than Lane. With him now staying in the glassware for over a year, his chakra started to grow upon the initiation of the integration, at a rate that's even faster than hers. Moreover, he did not get Lane's sudden drop in chakra levels. Therefore, his chakra eventually reached a level that's comparable to hers. Speaking of Lane, she has been now for a year in the school, and was doing so good that she immediately skipped 3rd grade to 4th grade. In the academy, it wasn't out of the ordinary that genius children would skip a year or more. It's just that before Lane's attendance, this was exclusive to 2 current students, Uchiha Izumi, and Uchiha Itachi. Lane was 1 year older than the two, but she was far behind the level of Itachi. He did better in ninjutsu, taijutsu, and even in written exams. In fact, even Izumi was stronger than Lane. This prevented the latter from ever feeling at ease, and pushed her to work harder and harder. A lot of what's special about the Uchiha was related to their Sharingan. At this age, they usually don't have it opened. Izumi did open it upon witnessing the death of her father on the Kyuubi's attack night, but she never used it, and was not even conscious about it. Lane, however, had perfect integration of Hashirama's genes with her own, gaining vitality and would release that's similar to his. With such a hack, the gap between her and the 2 Uchiha was getting smaller and smaller. Eventually, she could beat Izumi in a match. A few days later, she did the same against Itachi, getting to the top of her class. The loss had its impact on Itachi, who decided to practice a lot more diligently. Izumi was more indifferent to the loss, but she felt embarrassed upon watching her crush train so diligently. Under Shisui's guidance, the two improved very rapidly. Within just a few days, Itachi beat Lane again. Being Ryo's sister, Lane gradually became as relentless, and was not the type to admit defeat. To get back to the top of her class, she looked around for someone who could guide her training. There was no more obvious choice than the cage-tier monster who also happened to share household with her. Ryo, who had nothing to do recently, immediately agreed. He was interested in how this rivalry between the great Uchiha Itachi and the heir of Hashirama's wood release was going to turn out. Meanwhile, in the Rain Country, at the Akatsuki's new headquarters, 2 of the leaders of the organization were not seen by its members for a long time. For a whole year, the one who was in charge was Konan. She did not do well managing the organization, and her direction brought the Akatsuki heavy losses. In fact, not too long ago, the organization's base was destroyed, and many of its members were caught by the Rain Village. Poor Konan was helpless, and the members of the organization could not bear the situation any longer, and they decided to find Yahiko and Nagato at any cost. In fact, it wasn't just them, Konan hadn't seen Nagato in so long as well. Every time she tried to barge in through the door of the room in which he locked himself, she would be bounced off by a strong repulsive force. She tried enough times to give up, but today she was faced by the members of her organization, and she could only bring them to Nagato's room. Yahiko and Nagato are inside, but I can't open the door, you can try for yourselves. The members of the Akatsuki looked at each other, and they finally decided to assign the one who's most powerful physically to try to push the door open. Things obviously did not go any different, and the poor man was pushed far away from the door. However, the others did not believe that entry was impossible, and they tried to push the door in together, and together, they were sent flying back. Perhaps you should try ninjutsu. Konan had enough, she also hadn't seen Nagato for too long, and wanted to see what he was doing. The Akatsuki agreed, and they all prepared to attack the door together. Just then, the door opened, and they saw a familiar face, Yahiko. However, this did not make them happy at all, for their attacks had been launched, and they were all going towards their leader. Very calmly, Yahiko raised his hand, and a strong repulsive force bounced off all their ninjutsu. Konan breathed a sigh of relief, and then immediately ran over to her companions. She knew very well that Yahiko was dead, and could estimate that his resurrection had something to do with Nagato's eyes, because now, the same Rin-Egan were in Yahiko's sockets as well. Konan, long time no see. Nagato waved to Konan. Long time no see, Nagato. Has Yahiko recovered from his injuries? Konan's voice tensed up greatly upon mentioning the injuries. Nagato immediately answered, yes. However, his throat was injured too severely, and it did not get healed yet. So for now, Yahiko will not speak. Nagato controlled Yahiko to nod. Seeing all three of their leaders standing before them, the Akatsuki felt better at last. However, things were urgent, so they talked of the demolition of the base and their companions who were caught. Upon hearing about the Rain Village, Nagato remembered once again how Yahiko was ambushed and killed. After sighing coldly, he controlled Yahiko's body to fly into the sky, and sent it out of the base. Familiar with Yahiko, the rest of the Akatsuki were stunned. If Yahiko could fly, how come they never heard of that? Seeing everyone's surprised expressions, Nagato quickly explained, Yahiko's injury was in a way, both a blessing and a curse. While he had to be on the sidelines for over a year, his near-death experience awakened his Kekkei Genkai. Flying is one of the abilities it grants. Although this explanation was rather flawed and vague, the Akatsuki members chose to believe their leaders unconditionally. On the other side, Yahiko's body flew into the Rain Village, and following the information the Akatsuki had, he quickly arrived at the place where the captured members were detained. In the base, Nagato could see everything through Yahiko's eyes, and he found that the captured Akatsuki were held in a cave. Hundreds of rain ninjas were hiding around the pits, to ambush whoever would come from the Akatsuki. Nagato closed his eyes, transferring the power of his Rinnegan to Yahiko's body. The latter landed, and then raised his hands pointing their palms at the rain ninjas. Banshoten in. Nearly 100 rain ninjas who were exposed to the attack were pulled in towards Yahiko's body. Shinra Tensei. The rain ninjas who were just pulled in were pushed away violently, slamming into the disdain rocks. Yahiko's body continued to move forwards down the hill, to reach the cave where his companions were being held. Whenever he encountered someone that he didn't know, he just used Shinra Tensei and sent them away. Gradually, no more rain ninjas dared to move in. As he reached the portal to the inside of the cave, he used the black receivers to destroy the seals closing it, and then freed all the captured Akatsuki members. At the base, after Yahiko returned, he went into Nagato room with both Nagato and Konan. Nagato, what's this thing in Yahiko? Nagato had nothing to hide from Konan, telling her everything. This is what I managed to come up with following Ryo's advice. The power of the Rin-Egan is transferred to Yahiko's body through these black iron rods. This way, his body is preserved, could be moved, and use a portion of my Rinnegan's power. Konan nodded, murmuring, I feel awkward witnessing Yahiko move again. Hey, can you only control one? 6. The Rin-Egan has 6 main abilities. I will collect the appropriate corpses in the future, spreading these 6 abilities among them. They will be called Pain, and Yahiko will be Tendo Pain. Chapter 260, Deluded. The next day, the Akatsuki received an order from Nagato to start secretly collecting and preserving the bodies of the Jonins that would die in battle, leaving them intact. While the Akatsuki did feel that this order was really strange, they did not argue much, and just complied. Meanwhile, Black Zetsu, who had been lurking underground, also started to act. After seeing Tendo Pain, he realized that Nagato had finally mastered controlling his Rin-Egan. Therefore, he immediately passed the message to Obito, and then went to appear before Nagato. Seeing Black Zetsu once again, Nagato seemed very calm. After mastering the use of his Rin-Egan, he could perceive Black Zetsu approaching before the latter even showed up. Long time no see, Nagato. Yeah, I haven't seen you for a while now. I have to thank you for last time's reminder. Nagato's face was expressionless. You're welcome. What are you doing? Black Zetsu wasn't through answering Nagato when he felt a powerful pulling force bringing him closer to him. Nothing, I just want to know, what on earth are you? Shinra Tensei. The pulling force suddenly increased. With Black in his grasp, Nagato nailed him to the ground with a black rod. There were not many things that could restrain Black Zetsu's mobility, but the black rods made with the Rin-Egan were certainly one of them. Nagato, what are you doing? I've only been of help, why are you treating Lee like an enemy? I never said you're my enemy. I just want to know what you are. After that, Nagato made more black rods, piercing black with them where his heart and brain should be. You see, I know that you are not a human. No one could live after that. Nagato pulled out the rods, and Black Zetsu stood up shuddering under his gaze, unconsciously taking a couple steps back. Don't be nervous, I won't do that again. Just tell me what you want. Hearing Nagato, Black Zetsu was relieved. With the young Uzumaki being so kind, and him being around for so long, he could instantly recognize that he was honest. He said, Nagato, we want to cooperate with you. Hearing we, Nagato frowned, and then nodded for Black to carry on. We want to end this chaotic world of shinobi, and bring peace for all mankind, but we are not strong enough. You are the heir of the Rikudo Sennin. You can join us, and even lead us to a brighter future. Just when Black Zetsu started fearing that his story wasn't taken seriously, he heard a question, how will you achieve peace? That goal intrigued Zetsu greatly. I'll tell you that. Another figure appeared out of thin air. Space-time ninjutsu? And you say you're not strong enough? Nagato said with a smile. Nagato, this is Uchiha Madara-sama. As Nagato heard that name, the smile froze on his face. The name, Madara, was certainly one he had heard before. This was the man who ended the Warring States period with Hashirama forming Konoha, and a legend among all shinobi. However, after noticing the masked man's black hair, Nagato sneered saying, you said that's Uchiha Madara? Uchiha Madara would be over 90 years old if he had lived. You want me to believe that he kept his black hair? Is my black hair very strange? The masked man's voice sounded like that of one who had had a long life full with vicissitudes, and Nagato could feel a horrifying power coming from the scarlet eye that could be seen through his mask. Forget it. What does the great Uchiha Madara want from me? And what were you saying about peace? Nagato had no time to argue about the masked man's identity. My path to peace is to make the world feel pain. Only in pain could they find peace. Peace in pain. For some reason, the masked man's words made Nagato remember how Yahiko fell to his side. Yes. Just talking and negotiating will never make people understand each other. Only suffering and despair could link people who share the same pain, and bring them together. The masked man's words made Nagato fall into silence. These words were the exact opposite of what he had always believed. However, ever since Yahiko died, Nagato was thinking back of Jiraiya's teachings about peace, wondering if they were realistic in any way. Now, the masked man's words hit that string, and he got his answer. His eyes showed more and more resolve as he asked the masked man, and how will you do that? Our plan is to collect the Biju, using them to develop an ancient forbidden weapon. Its chakra would be terrifying, and if we use that, we could destroy a country in an instant. Destroy a country? That's not peace, that's war, war against the world. Nagato's face changed, this was not the peace he sought. Peace has no meaning without war. We want mankind to suffer pain and despair. The only way to make people avoid waging war is for them to fear its consequence more than they crave its benefits. Enough pain will guide the world towards stability and peace. Nagato once again did not answer, as Obito's words had a massive impact on him. Seeing him being shaken, the masked man continued, think carefully about this, Nagato. You know this pain, the pain of losing your loved ones and friends. If everyone was to know that feeling, who would ever want to start a war? After a long time of contemplation, Nagato finally echoed the masked man's words, let the world feel pain, and they will welcome peace. So, will you join us? Nagato immediately shook his head saying, no. You join me, join the Akatsuki. The masked man heard Nagato and wondered, why? While I agree with your path to peace, I will not leave the Akatsuki. My close friend, whose lifelong dream was to bring peace to the world of shinobi, had left me this organization. I am inheriting my desire for peace from him. Hearing that, the man in the mask nodded, agreeing to Nagato's requirement. He then told him that he was going to bring his people to the Akatsuki in the following few days. After reaching a consensus, the masked man left the Akatsuki's base with Black Zetsu. Space-time ninjutsu, that must be convenient. Nagato muttered as he watched the two before him disappear. Just then, Konan returned from a mission that she had that night. Nagato told her about the masked man and what he had said. Her intuition told her that this man was no good news, but the flame that was reborn in Nagato's eyes made her not know how to speak her mind. In the end, she chose to compromise. She had lost Yahiko already, and could not afford to lose Nagato as well. She decided right then and there that whatever he did from now on, she would stick by his side. Chapter 261, The Roots of the New Akatsuki. After Obito and Black Zetsu left Nagato, they both went to their temporary hideout, where both Kakuzu and Sasori were awaiting them. The two were saved by Obito on the Kyubi's night and brought to this place. Whenever either of the two thought of that night, they would get extremely scared. Kakuzu had 4 of his 5 hearts crushed, while Sasori's main puppet Hiriko was greatly damaged, and he had to leave several other puppet of his behind. It was actually a necessity, as he used them as shields, making up for his melee range weakness, and protecting his and Kakuzu's lives. Because of this, the latter became somewhat grateful to him. After his wounds healed up, Kakuzu went out several times killing several ninjas to complete his set of hearts again. As for Sasori, he repaired Hiriko's puppet, and then spent a great deal of his time making other simpler spare ones. "It looks like you are recovering well." The figure of the masked man suddenly appeared in the cave. The two were freaked out like usual by his sudden appearance. Sasori answered, "Well, yes. Now, can we leave? We've done our part. You can go at any time, but don't you want revenge?" "Oh, revenge? Forget it. I don't think I'm going back to Konoha anytime soon." Kakuzu sneered bitterly. "I never said I'm going there now. I'm inviting you to join an organization. I promise you, doing so will give you the chance for getting your revenge." "I am not interested in joining any organization." Sasori refused on the spot. "This organization can provide you with the fitting research environment to ensure that you never get disrupted by anyone, including the sand on your pursuit." Obito's words made Sasori think of his ultimate dream, completing his transformation. He answered, "Is that so?" "Of course." "Kakuzu, want to join us as well? You'll get great amounts of money." Kakuzu's eyes lit up. To him, money was everything. However, being from the same generation as Hashirama, he was wise enough not to just take the word of a masked man. "If that's the case, then you have to tell me at least about this organization." "It is the largest mercenary organization in the world, the Akatsuki." "The Akatsuki? The Rain's Akatsuki? They have a lot of potential for making profit indeed." "Well, I agree. I'll try and see if things happen like you're promising," Sasori added. Seeing both of them agreeing, the masked man nodded with satisfaction, and all three, along with Black Zetsu and White Zetsu, transferred together to the Akatsuki base. When they got there, Black Zetsu didn't want to go inside. Seeing that, the latter asked, "Why won't you go it?" Before Black answered, White Zetsu said to him, "Can you feel that? There was sudden burst of power inside the base just now. The source of this power was Nagato. The Akatsuki had already sent back 2 unscathed Jonin bodies to the base. Unconsciously, Nagato chose one he had seen before, and inserted a black rod into his body. With his experience making Tendo pain, things went a lot more smoothly, and it took him no time to make the second path of pain. "Konan, go over to our guests and bring them into with Tendo." After saying that, Nagato controlled Tendo pain to leave Yahiko's room. Konan and Tendo went out together and found Kakuzu and the others. "Never underestimate the Rinnegan. You've already found us," said Obito as he saw Konan and Tendo pain. Kakuzu was shocked, and he asked hastily, "The Rinnegan? You're saying someone in the Akatsuki has the eyes of the legendary Rikudo Sennin?" "Yes, you can see them right there." Obito pointed to Yahiko's eyes. "It's really the Rinnegan." Kakuzu's greed kept him from remaining still. The Rinnegan, if ever found, would be one of the most expensive goods to ever be sold on the black market. With that in mind, Kakuzu's nature quickly got exposed. His greed made him lose all his senses, and he directly rushed at Tendo pain. "Shinra Tensei!" Tendo pain puffed and threw Kakuzu away with ease. The latter got up in place, his eyes set on the Rinnegan. White Zetsu immediately yelled, "Kakuzu! This Rinnegan is not for you to take away. And you're no opponent to him. Calm down." Kakuzu did not answer, and just stared at Nagato with his eyes filled with greed. Konan fought her distaste of Kakuzu and said, "Come in with me." After she led everyone to the Akatsuki's conference room, Nagato controlled Tendo to take the main seat. Over the past few days, he was becoming more and more proficient at controlling Tendo pain. Now, he was able to speak through him. Nagato intended to remain behind the scenes, and let Yahiko be at the front as pain. These are your people. Tendo turned around to Obito. Yes, this is Kakuzu, an rebel from the waterfall village who was once sent to assassinate the first Hokage, and this is Sasori, the greatest puppeteer to ever come out of the sand village. Obito introduced the two to Tendo. The latter nodded and said, "You are both welcome to join the Akatsuki." Hold on. This guy promised me that you'll provide enough cover and resources for me to develop my puppets. Can you guarantee that? Sasori quickly said. Kakuzu was also quick to add, he told me I'll be making a lot of money. I can promise you that will happen. Tendo did not hesitate to agree again. Seeing Kakuzu agree, Sasori soon followed and said he's willing to stay. Konan gave 3 Akatsuki outfits to Obito, Kakuzu and Sasori, while Tendo placed 4 rings on the table. This looks good, said Kakuzu, after putting on the black cloak with the red clouds. It's alright, in line with my art style. Sasori also felt good about his new outfit. I have created these rings. They signify your membership in the Akatsuki, and can allow for our communication. I'm Zero, Konan is White. You, Zetsu, take Pig. Kakuzu will have North, Sasori will have Jewel, and you can have. The masked man interrupted Tendo, I will not have any of them. I am not suitable for this task. Tendo stared at Obito for a second, and then took back the ring. Zero, how many of each ring are there? Sasori asked. 10. That is to say, there will be 10 of us? What's our mode of action, and what the purpose behind this organization? As for mode of action, you will do missions in pairs. As for purpose, I will tell you that when our ranks are complete. Now, the organization is just a prototype of what it will turn out to be. You can come and go at will, and I will use the ring to communicate with you when something happens. Kakuzu said on the side, sounds good. At least we won't be restrained. Konan, arrange accommodations for both of them as soon as possible. Kakuzu, for now, you will be observed. If you are deemed appropriate for the role, you will be given the management of the Akatsuki's funds. After saying that, Tendo left the room, and with that, the new Akatsuki was established. Chapter 262, Orochimaru's Departure. After a few days observing Kakuzu, Nagato confirmed that he could be trusted enough, and fulfilled his promise. Konan handed over the financial management of the Akatsuki to Kakuzu. After many years as a mercenary organization, the Akatsuki actually had an abundance of funds in hand. When Kakuzu had access to the records, his eyes shone golden in joy. As for Sasori, he was out at his own hideout during those days, and no one knew what he was doing. Nagato sent out Tendo Pain and Gakido Pain to find him more bodies of Jonins he has seen before. He wanted to complete all 6 paths as soon as possible to avenge Yahiko. Back in Konoha, Ryo was observing the growth of his sister, Lane. He was far from worried. She was competing with 2 talented Uchiha, and all 3 were growing through that competition, which was a good thing. However, when Lane and Izumi were having a practice fight, Lane's wood release was suddenly exposed. When learning of the news, Ryo immediately teleported to the academy, and picked up Lane. Back home, he asked her about what had happened, and she told him that after feeling a peculiar chakra from Izumi, her wood release went out of control. Izumi had nothing special about her power-wise in the anime. She was just shown to be Itachi's love interest, until she died by his hands during the Uchiha massacre. As for her family, her father was normal ninja, and her mother was Uchiha civilian. Besides her Uchiha blood, Ryo could think of nothing special about her that could trigger such a reaction. So, how could it happen? How could an Uchiha trigger a Senju-specific Kekii Genkai? Unfortunately, Ryo had no time to think about this matter, for the news about Lane spread across the entire village. Wood release had a special significance for Konoha. With this power, the first Hokage was the man who ended the chaos of the Warring State era, and then built the foundation of what Konoha was today. On top of that, this was also a Kekii Genkai of the Senju clan. How could a Yamanaka ever awaken such an ability? Very quickly, the Yamanaka clan fell under a lot of pressure. Konoha's citizens, whether civilians or ninjas, all wanted to know what was going on. In the Hokage's office, Sakumo was looking at Lane and Ryo standing before him, feeling a headache from the whole matter. He never expected that Ryo would bring him such a big surprise. "Ryo, speak up. What happened to this little girl?" With Lane's power already exposed, Ryo had nothing to hide and he said, "Sakumo-san, Lane was initially a girl with outstanding amounts of spiritual power for her age. I conducted some experiments on her, and..." Ryo gave Sakumo a general idea about the experiment, and intentionally omitted Orochimaru, who was present in the meeting, from his narrative. Right now, Danzo's old plans were not in action, and Orochimaru did not have to leave Konoha. While the latter did have the idea, Ryo had been trying to retain him recently, and Orochimaru's attitude eventually loosened up. Therefore, Ryo did not want him bothered by the matter, for he did not want to awaken his desire to leave. However, as soon as Sakumo heard the word experiment, he immediately thought of Orochimaru. After taking a deep breath, he decided to go with Ryo's version of the events and did not say anything. "Ryo, what are you going to do about this?" After some thought, Ryo said, "We should drag this out for a while. During this time, I will go and find Tsunadeheim, and ask her for help. If I could get her to claim that Lane is related to the Senju, we would have no more problems." As soon as Ryo finished his words, Orochimaru interfered, "No. I will take the full blame for this. Recently, I've been looking for an excuse to leave Konoha, this is my chance." "Orochi-san, why must you leave?" said Ryo with a bitter smile. "Yes, Orochimaru. Being Tsunade's teammate before should make it normal for you to meet her. You could go with Ryo's plan yourself if you want. Why should you go as far as to leave Konoha?" Sakumo also asked. "Ryo-kun, you of all people should understand why I must leave. Here, my scientific ambitions will never be satisfied." Ryo remained silent, knowing that Orochimaru was right. In Konoha, there were far too many restrictions and regulations, and far too many people who admired and cared about Orochimaru. Ryo knew all too well that this was not the Orochimaru he saw in the anime. This Orochimaru maintained his humanity, his emotions, and could not just ignore the feelings of his village and explore the unknown wantonly. "Well, I guess this means things are decided. I'm going back to clean up my lab. Sakumo, in a few days, you can send the umbu there." After saying that, Orochimaru left the office. Looking at his back, Ryo sighed. Orochimaru was his teacher, his friend, and in many ways, the two were the only ones who could understand each other in this world. Now that he had decided to leave, Ryo was obviously not feeling good about that. He returned home with Lane, and locked himself up in his room and did not get out until Sakumo's umbu came for him. In Orochimaru's lab, the umbu found a child in glassware, one whose cells were integrated with those of Hashirama. Based on this, the umbu concluded that the one behind Lane's wood release abilities was Orochimaru. When receiving the news, Sakumo immediately announced, "Orochimaru has used the cells of the first Hokage to conduct human experiments. He has violated taboos of Konoha, and from today on, he is no longer one of Konoha's ninjas. Sakumo-sama, Orochimaru-sama is very powerful, and knows too many of Konoha's secrets. If he's to take the path of all of those who cut off their villages, he would end up turning into an S-tier missing nin. I was in a similar position in the past, and now I'm in the Hokage's office." Hearing that, the umbu had no more arguments, and they turned away conveying Sakumo's orders. Meanwhile, outside Konoha, Ryo was looking for Orochimaru while hiding his chakra. As he found him, he also found Jiraiya on the ground, unconscious. Just like in the anime, he tried to stop him, and just like then, he was too kind to fight back seriously, and was knocked out by Orochimaru. Ryo looked at Jiraiya, and then scanned the area, confirming that there were no other people around. Then, he pretended not to care about the unconscious Sunin, and greeted Orochimaru, "Hello Orochi-san, you weren't going to leave without saying goodbye, weren't you?" Orochimaru smiled and said, "You've finally arrived, Ryo-kun. I've been waiting for too long, and this idiot caught up with me. I don't know how he got the news, but he came from outside the village to stop me. Yet I saw. Orochi-san, don't you have any regrets?" "Regrets? Maybe I'll have some in the future, but not now. By the way, I have taken Yujao and Anko along with me. While Anko doesn't care much, Yujao still wants to be a ninja of Konoha in the future. I'll entrust you with this matter. I'll handle it. Orochi-san, I've promised you before that I will help you build the greatest lab in the world, and I will keep that word." I'll be waiting for you. Orochimaru licked his lips excitedly. Oh, one last thing, Orochimaru-san, have mercy for Kakashi. Orochimaru was surprised, nodded, and then turned around and left. Chapter 263, One's Purpose. Orochimaru's defection set off an uproar in Konoha. All the civilians wondered how one of the legendary Sunin could actually do such a thing. Unlike the civilians, the clans were now focusing on harvesting the fruit of his work on Hashirama's cells. Lane had been living with Yamanaka clan for quite some time now, being Ryo's sister. After witnessing what the latter could do, especially on that night when he faced the Kyuubi himself, all clans knew that they could not afford to offend him on their own. Therefore, Lane's clan was determined by default. In the Hokage's conference room, all clans were almost waging war over who would adopt Yamato. All of a sudden, an Umbu entered and approached Sakumo, whispering something in his ears. As the latter heard whatever the Umbu said, his face became pale and he immediately ended the meeting and rushed out. In Konoha's hospital, Ryo was looking helplessly at Kakashi, who was wrapped in bandages. Orochi-san is too cruel. I told him to be merciful, and look how Kakashi turned out. Ryo thought. Kakashi was thinking at this time as well, wondering why Orochimaru did not kill him. Shouldn't he, a defecting ninja, kill the Umbu following him? But Orochimaru was acting more like a rough instructor than an enemy. Just as both were thinking about that, Sakumo arrived. Seeing Kakashi in bed, he frowned with anger in his eyes. Ryo, how's Kakashi? He just has some flesh wounds, a whole lot of flesh wounds. He's a bit weak now, and he's not in a state suitable for a lot of medical ninjutsu intervention. He'll be better off taking a few days of rest. Hearing that his son was fine, Sakumo breathed a sigh of relief. Sakumo-san, I'll leave now, and let have a good chat with Kakashi. Saint turned around and left. Both father and son were not that talkative. After a long silence, Sakumo said, Kakashi, how did you feel facing Orochimaru? Kakashi bowed his head. Facing the Sunin, he did not even have the courage to fight. Orochimaru smothered him with just momentum alone. Seeing his son's face, Sakumo could guess how he felt and how things went down in the woods. As a father, Sakumo felt he had the duty of comforting Kakashi. However, as a ninja, he felt that this experience should greatly help Kakashi's growth, that is if Kakashi could manage to conquer his fear on his own. After some hesitation, Sakumo decided not to say anything, hoping that his son would grow out of this experience. Once again, silence prevailed in the ward, until this time, it was broken by Kakashi. Dad, why did you try to commit suicide back when I was younger? Sakumo was stunned by the question and he asked, why ask about this so suddenly? Because Orochimaru said that, only when I understand you could I be stronger. This is the thing I don't understand the most about you. Sakumo did not answer immediately, asking instead, Kakashi, why do you think I did that to myself? Kakashi replied after some thought, the pressure of the village? Your self-esteem. Sakumo shook his head. Kakashi, do you truly think that I am one to fall to the pressure? Do you think I'm one to value self-esteem over life? Kakashi became more and more confused. Why did you do it then? I doubted my purpose. Purpose? Yes. All my life, I've always thought of myself as a ninja, as a tool for performing task. Everything I've built in life was revolving around fulfilling my duty. That is, until I've chosen to give up on all of that to rescue my companions. Why did you make that choice at the time? Sakumo recalled those days, smiled and said, first of all, one of them was my good friend, and probably because he was also a father. Kakashi blinked, and he did not understand what Sakumo was saying. When we went out on missions at the time, he often mentioned his child to me. Every time he did so, I thought back of you. I guess, I did not want his son to grow up without a father, so I chose to give up on the task to save him. Kakashi did not expect that this would be the reason behind Sakumo's abandonment of the mission, and he did not know what to think. I kept wondering if I did the right thing. When I saved them, I went against my own purpose, and broke the rules of this world we are living in. A ninja giving up on the task for a ninja, the idea sounds ridiculous. When back in the village, how the ones I saved blamed me made me even more certain that I did wrong. Someone who doesn't live for his purpose does not deserve to live. I was not going to live for the same reason I broke the mission for, so I chose to kill myself. But Dad, why have you changed your mind after being saved? Because that helped me find a new purpose. Kakashi's eyes lit up and he anxiously asked, new purpose? I am a guardian. I'm guarding the village and the people I love. At the time, after he saved my life, Ryo used his clan's techniques to communicate with me, and I had already died once. Such a thing could change one's perspective. That and Ryo helped me understand that executing mission was not the purpose of a ninja. The power of a ninja should be used to protect one's loved ones. Protect one's loved ones. Kakashi murmured Sakumo's words, and then fell into thought. Sakumo did not say anything, turned around, and left Konoha's hospital. After Ryo left the hospital, he immediately went to the archives room, and wanted to find out some information about Izumi's father. All he knew was that her mother was an Uchiha. While it was a bit more common for the Uchiha men to marry foreigners to their clan, it was rare for their women to do so. Finding him should be a breeze. Sure enough, after Ryo talked to the management of the archive, they gave him access to the documents that he requested. They gave him 5 scrolls of non-Uchihas marrying Uchiha women. Out of the 5, 4 were Jonins, and only 1 was a Chunin. Ryo picked up the registration form and looked at his photo, just to smile after a while. He then took Izumi's father name to Sakumo, and asked him for help getting information about him. A while later, an umbu brought back a scroll. It did not contain much information about him, after all, he was just a Chunin. Ryo opened the scroll and quickly went through it. When he saw more about this man, and how he was an orphan, he became more and more certain of his presumption. Sakumo-san, I think I know why Lane's wood release went out of control. Is it related to this ninja? Yes, this is Uchiha Izumi's father. Lane said that she had sensed a special chakra from her body before her wood release went out of control. Seeing this man, I think I know what was behind that. Chapter 264, The Restless World of Shinobi. What is that chakra then? The matter was seemingly related to a Kekii Genkai of Konoha, which was very interesting to Sakumo as well. Sakumo-san, can you think of someone who looks like this man, said Ryo as he handed the photo of Izumi's father to Sakumo. The latter glanced at the photo, and immediately, another face appeared in his mind. No. Ryo, the Nidame did not have children. Also, their hair color is different, and I guess the similarity between the two must be a coincidence. I don't think there could so many coincidences. And well, I never said he's the Nidame's son, I just think he's another Senju, one who ended up as an orphan and was raised by another family. Well, that much is possible. Sakumo did find Ryo's proposition logical. But hold on, you mean that the Senju blood in Izumi's veins is what drove Lane's wood release out of control? That's impossible. Ryo answered solemnly, indeed, it is impossible for a pure-blooded Senju. However, Izumi's mother is an Uchiha. Uchiha? What does that have to do with wood release? Like most of the living at this time, Sakumo did not have an idea about the roots of the relationship between the Senju and the Uchiha. Therefore, he could not understand Ryo. Sakumo-san, could you send the umbu out before we continue? Sakumo frowned in surprise, but then immediately asked the umbu to leave the office. With only the two of them remaining, Ryo told Sakumo about the relationship between the Uchiha and the Senju, and how it goes beyond the Warring State era. Never expecting that the two families had such a deep history, Sakumo was very surprised. Ryo, how did you learn about this secret? With these. Ryo pointed to his own eyes and continued, the Uchiha's Naka shrine has a stone tablet that records the secrets of the Uchiha, but only the Mangekyo Sharinon can read it. With his last question answered, Sakumo fully understood what Izumi's parents being who they were meant. So, Izumi probably has the blood of both Uchiha and Senju clans, and that chakra that Lane sensed is the product of the combination both clans' blood. Ryo nodded, as that was his theory indeed. However, he still felt strange about the whole deal. In the anime, Izumi was rather ordinary in strength, and it would be reasonable to think that with her having blood of both clans, she should have shown greater talent. Sakumo-san, we should look more into this matter. Yes, I know. Sakumo nodded, and then Ryo left the office. The next day, Ryo took Lane to practice in the third training ground. With the matter of Orochimaru being the main topic in Konoha, his sister was also incredibly focused on. She couldn't go to the academy, and could only be trained by Ryo. However, this situation did not last long. With great efforts from both Sakumo and the third, the storm of public intrigue and debate soon subsided. A month later, with the incident basically left behind, Lane also returned to the academy. Meanwhile, in the Akatsuki's base, standing in front of Nagato were 6 expressionless people. They all wore black cloaks embroidered with red clouds. Everyone's faces and bodies were plugged with black rods that connected them and conducted chakra to them, and all of their eyes looked exactly like Nagato's. Looking at the face of Tendo Pain, Yahiko muttered to himself, "Yahiko, it's finally time for revenge." On the same day, led by Tendo Pain, the 6 paths of pain left together to the Rain Village. Facing his godly power, the village stood no chance, and was quickly conquered. With this, Nagato transferred the Akatsuki's base, making the village his new headquarter. A month after leaving Konoha, Orochimaru finally found a suitable place to establish his base, choosing the rice fields country. At this time, he was not interested in establishing a village. He just wanted to have a place where he could experiment with peace of mind. This was a small country on the borders of the Fire Country, one that didn't really have a ninja village. Orochimaru gave the place a new name, the Sound Country, and he promised that as long as he was there, he would not let anyone invade it. The people heard that there was someone who could stabilize and protect their country, and they immediately agreed to help him establish his base. Meanwhile, the Earth Country, which suffered some of the greatest damage during the Third Shinobi World War, was still in the process of recovery. But Onaki, the third Tsuchikage, was now particularly lively, for he had recently taken in a new talented young man as a disciple. "Hey, old man, you promised to help me perfect my art. So, what are you waiting for?" a blonde teenager yelled at Onaki. For once, Onaki did not care, and began to instruct Deidara on the use of explosive clay. The third Tsuchikage has been around since the days of Uchiha Madara, but had never witnessed a young man with such a talent for the use of explosive clay. Back in Konoha, in the Hokage's office, Sakumo looked at these pieces of information and had a headache. Konoha received intelligence about civil strife in the Rain Country. However, due to it being a closed country, Konoha's spies could not determine the outcome of this strife. As for the establishment of Orochimaru's new base, Sakumo just gave that scroll a glance and then tossed it to the side. His focus was more on Onaki's new disciple. Knowing Onaki's character, Sakumo was sure that this child was no average kid. Otherwise, the Tsuchikage wouldn't have accepted him as disciple. He said to the Umbu on his side, "Go bring me Ryo." A while later, Ryo entered the office. Sakumo said directly, "Ryo, I have a new task for you. Today, I've received news about Onaki taking in a new disciple. I've also heard that he is a user of explosive clay." Hearing this description, Ryo immediately thought of the Akatsuki's artist, Deidara. This young man's name is Deidara, and that old man Onaki is having high hopes in him. I'm pretty sure that he is no regular clay user. I want to sneak into their village, and find out exactly how special this kid is. If you estimate that he would become a great threat to Konoha, look for the opportunity, and kill him. Ryo nodded and accepted the task, but he did not intend to go to the Earth Country. Just a few days ago, he had received a letter from Orochimaru, in which the latter told him that he had settled in the Sound Country. Ryo obviously wanted to go see him, but he needed a legitimate reason to leave the village. Sakumo's task just came in time. With him knowing all about Deidara already, he should just go to Orochimaru. The next day, Ryo left the village on his own, heading towards the Earth Country. Midway towards his destination, he disappeared. He appeared again next to Orochimaru. The latter was chatting with the daimyo of the Sound Country who, when seeing Ryo appear out of thin air, was startled and scared out of his mind. Ryo looked at the panicking man, frowned and then used genjutsu on him directly. Orochimaru was also quite taken by surprise, but he still smiled and said, "Hello, Ryo-kun, long time no see." Chapter 265. Ryo remained in the Sound Country for a week. He gave a lot of pointers and ideas to Orochimaru regarding the building of his lab. On top of that, Ryo also gave him a list of many Kekii Genkai, mostly based on a combination of the information that Konoha has and his memories of the anime. It mentioned the positions and ability of several Kekii Genkai owners. Obviously, this information made Orochimaru very excited. He was just thinking about understanding Kekii Genkai better as he was building the lab, and Ryo's information came right on time. After leaving this information, Ryo left the country returning to Konoha, telling Sakumo all about Deidara, and saying that in due time, he shouldn't have trouble crushing him if needed. With that, things around Konoha reached a certain balance, and before anyone realized it, 2 years went by. Lane was now at the age for graduation. She had perfectly adapted with Hashirama's cells, and had shown amazing talent over the course of the past 2 years. This showed on many levels, the first of which is the amount of chakra in her body. The Senju, like the Uzumaki, have great chakra stores, and Lane, having Hashirama's cells integrated with her own, already had chakra comparable to that of the manga's Kakashi. Note, manga's Kakashi has less chakra than current Kakashi. Wood release was another aspect where her growth showed well. Ryo had copied many wood release jutsus from the Scroll of Seals, and now Lane could use her Kekii Genkai very proficiently. Even with that, she was not undisputed in her school, for Itachi remained in her class. In the entire school, he was the only one who could compete with her. Perhaps this was driven by his competition with her, but at the age of 8, Itachi was still in school, and had activated his 2-tomo Sharingan. The two's strength eclipsed that of everyone else in school, and they became at the center of attention in Konoha, with many people comparing their rivalry to that of Madara and Hashirama from back in the day. The day of the graduation exam was to be the day their final rematch in school. This attracted a lot of people to come and watch, and even Sakumo, who's usually very busy, could come over. "Sakumo-san, you came to join in the fun?" Ryo asked with a smile. Sakumo nodded and replied, "Well, I am also very interested in this graduation exam." Now, Ryo was already 18 years old, officially an adult. During the past 2 years, he had been traveling a lot to the Sand Village, and to the Sound Country. Sakumo was the only one who knew about this, and he even went as far as covering for him with the other higher-ups of the village. The final exam started very quickly, and its first part was a triple clone jutsu test. Some of the kids were disturbed by the watching crowds, mistakes were made, and funny abominations were created, arousing the laughter of the crowd from time to time. Next, Uchiha Izumi. Hearing her name, the smile on Sakumo's face faded a little. Ever since he learned of the secret of the Uchiha and Senju, he had been secretly concerned about what Izumi could display in the future. In the past 2 years, Izumi wasn't comparable to Lane and Itachi, but she still much stronger than the rest of her peers. In fact, her chakra control was even better than that of Lane and Itachi. Obviously, the test was no challenge to her, and she passed with a perfect score. Despite the fact that there were many children trying before her, she was the first to achieve that, and everyone in the crowd applauded wholeheartedly. The last two were Itachi and Lane, and the two also passed with flying flags. With this phase of the exam completed, the next part was actual combat, which was reserved to the ones with perfect score. This test was made to determine the one to be the first of the promotion. Obviously, there were only 3 contenders, Lane, Itachi, and Izumi. "Sensei, I am sorry. I'm forfeiting." The battles had not yet begun, when Izumi voluntarily forfeited, giving up on first spot. Izumi Uchiha took the initiative to give up. The top student of this promotion will be determined by the battle between Uchiha Itachi and Yamanaka Lane. Hearing the words of the instructor, the two looked at each other and then saluted each other according to school rules. With that, the duel officially began. Fire release, Great Fireball. Water release, Water Wall. Both contenders began with a simple C-class jutsu to test each other, and then went straight to a Taijutsu duel. While Itachi had Shisui as a Taijutsu instructor, Lane did not practice Taijutsu that well and was in a disadvantage against him momentarily. "Ryo, there's something off with your sister." Hearing Sakumo, Ryo's face was red. In the past 2 years, he placed all his focus on teaching Lane ninjutsu, especially wood release. In the process, he ignored teaching her Taijutsu. With hand-to-hand combat not working, Lane had to change things up. Wood release, wood clone. From her body, 2 wooden clones were separated in front of her as she stepped back. Itachi shattered the first one while quickly activating his Sharingan. Lane was rather skilled with her jutsus, and even with the Sharingan, Itachi could barely distinguish her from the clone. After crushing the second clone, he rushed straight to Lane behind it. Little did he know that as he took 2 steps forward, a tree vine spurted out of the ground tying up his feet, and Lane was already behind his neck saying proudly, "You lost." "Is that so? The one who just lost is you." The Itachi who was tied by the tree vine turned into scattering crows, and the true Itachi appeared behind Lane, stabbing her in the back with a kunai. With a cold hum, her body turned into a piece of wood. These kids are just too good. They haven't graduated yet, and they're already beyond Chunin tier. That crow just should be Shisui's. I did not expect Itachi to have learned it. Sakumo sighed. Well, Shisui mastered that jutsu during the war, but Itachi, being the true genius that he is, learned his signature jutsu so quickly. Both Lane and Itachi were equally skilled in this ninjutsu battle, but Lane had more chakra. With her being able to keep her distance from Itachi, keeping him from resorting to taijutsu, and with him eventually running out of chakra, Lane emerged victorious. Immediately after the battle, Shinse and Mikoto both rushed to their children. Lane! You've fought well, my pride. You've done great, Itachi. You're the best. Obviously, both moms were very satisfied with their children's performance. The next day, Lane went to the classroom, waiting for the announcement of the new genin teams. After waiting for a long time, their instructor arrived late. The sensei did not speak nonsense, immediately listing the new teams: Team 6, Lane Yamanaka, Itachi Uchiha, Izumi Uchiha. Hearing the names of Izumi and Itachi, Lane frowned, remembering that Ryo told her that there were plans to place the Uchiha geniuses under the guidance of an elite from their clan after graduation. How come she was placed with them? Lane looked back at the two and found them to be very calm. They must have known of this already. After a while, Lane heard a very familiar voice: Team 6, come with me. Shisui and I-san, how is it you? Lane asked in surprise. Why can't it be me? Hurry up, I'll be waiting for you in the third training ground. After saying that, Shisui's figure disappeared. Chapter 266. In the third training ground, Ryo was on the side, interested in watching Shisui and the new Team 6 trio. Like many other instructors, Shisui's first test to his team was the bell test. In the past 2 years, working in the Umbu helped Shisui make substantial growth in both personality and strength, becoming a more reliable and mature ninja. This team was stronger than the average genin team, with Lane and Itachi being both above Chunin tier, and Izumi also being stronger than most genins. Nevertheless, for over half an hour, none of the three could even touch the bell, let alone grab it. Shisui, nicknamed Shisui of the body flicker in the manga, was now even faster after having to deal with the extremely fast and teleporting Ryo. Lane and Itachi were more of ninjutsu-type ninjas, the type that would usually have trouble dealing with a speed-type ninja. With Shisui being far better than the two even in ninjutsu, the two did not stand a chance. On the other hand, Izumi was more of a taijutsu-type ninja. With so many failed attempts, the geniuses on her side soon realized that they were not going anywhere this way. Their only chance was to support the one that's more flexible and better at taijutsu, Izumi. With the three competing for 3 years, it was rather intuitive for them to cooperate. By just looking to each other's eyes, they rapidly changed their strategy. Lane and Itachi started using ninjutsu differently, as a way to corner and shackle Shisui for Izumi to try to take away the bell. This gave Shisui a lot of trouble, but he still had a very clear edge on them. Nevertheless, the two understood well Shisui's main weakness: he just would not really hurt them. Therefore, the two became much more aggressive in their approach, which allowed Izumi to touch the bell several times. Unfortunately for them, Shisui's reflexes were too fast, and every time Izumi did that, he quickly flickered away. Over an hour later, all three lied on the ground exhausted. Shisui approached them laughing and said, "If it was instructor testing you, you would probably succeed. It's a pity that you were stuck with me, ha ha ha. Hey, you're just older than me. I'll be stronger than you at your age." Never admitting a total defeat, Lane defyingly whispered on the side. As for Itachi, he was also dissatisfied with his own performance. However, being around Shisui since childhood, he knew all about how strong his instructor was, and said nothing. Poor Izumi on the other hand was rather nervous, worrying that her failure would cause her team to be sent back to the Ninja Academy. "Well, you still did very well. Your individual capabilities are outstanding, and your teamwork is also very good. While you did not steal the bell, I'll still allow you to graduate. Congratulations, you're now officially ninja, Team 6. Really, sensei?" Izumi asked carefully. Shisui smiled and nodded, "Of course. Now, have some good rest, and after you recover, I'll invite you for some barbecue, my treat." "Sensei, want to come?" Another day, Shisui. "Lane, you've done very well today, I'm very satisfied with your performance. After saying that, Ryo disappeared. In the Hokage office, Ryo suddenly appeared. With this happening before him for so many years now, Sakumo wasn't even fazed, and just said as he felt Ryo's presence, "How did the three of them do?" "They did well, better than what you would expect from good genins." "I can believe that, I also think those three are pretty good." Sakumo shared Ryo's thoughts. After chatting for a while, he suddenly remembered something. "Right, Ryo, didn't you say that Minato's resurrection would require Orochimaru to complete this experiment? How is that going so far?" Ryo sighed, "Oh, not too good I'm afraid. In the past 2 years, Orochi-san has been working on this diligently, but unfortunately, the clones he's creating are nothing like original physically, with some of them not even being suitable to refining chakra." "Hold on, did you say they are inferior physically?" "Well, shouldn't that be something that's acquired through training?" "That is true, but if the body is not good, Minato Ni-san wouldn't be able to recover his strength, even through training." Sakumo nodded, and didn't say more. From the office, Ryo teleported to Orochimaru's lab. After 2 years of construction, the lab was finally complete. In the past 2 years, Orochimaru was looking around the world for the ninjas mentioned in Ryo's list, and among them, he found Kimimaro, who quickly became one of his most loyal subordinates. Like most of the time, Orochimaru was now experimenting with cloning in the lab deep under the base. As Ryo said to Sakumo, his experiments were not going smoothly or making much progress. However, Orochimaru was never discouraged by the consecutive failures of his experiments. In the past 2 years, he just kept on repeating them again and again like a mad scientist. Upon entering, Ryo did not bother Orochimaru, and just picked up the data on the last experiment off the table and reading through it. A while later, Orochimaru and Anko left the inside lab. Seeing Ryo, the latter asked, "Ryo, what bring you here?" "Nothing, I just thought of the cloning experiment earlier and came in to check out the results." "Ryo-kun, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you once again, we still made no progress with that experiment," Orochimaru answered. "Yes, I figured that out," said Ryo as he raised that data in his hand. "Well, although we've made no progress with the cloning experiment, I have found something interesting through your list of Kekkai Genkai." "What is it?" Anything that made Orochimaru interested was certainly something to grab Ryo's attention as well. Orochimaru smiled and said, "Anko, tell Kimimaro to bring the other kid over for Ryo to see." "Okay, sensei." Kimimaro and a kid. Hearing Kimimaro's name, Ryo had a guess on the identity of the other kid. Sure enough, it wasn't long until Kimimaro arrived with a child with orange hair. "Orochimaru-sama, Ryo-sama." Kimimaro greeted the two. "Ryo-kun, this child next to Kimimaro is the interesting discovery I mentioned. He is indeed really interesting. I never saw someone who can absorb natural energy naturally like this." Ryo ice release was different, interacting with water and air natural energy exclusively. Sage mode relied on training and absorbing natural energy after having contact with it and practicing with one of the sage animals of the 3 unexplored sage regions. Yugo was indeed the first person Ryo met to naturally have such an affinity for natural energy. "Ryo-kun, basing on Yugo's interaction with natural energy, I've perfected a new technique, one that would allow ordinary people to use natural energy. I've named it Juinka, Cursed Seal Transformation." After saying that, Orochimaru took Ryo to his base's training ground where 2 children were fighting. Ryo saw a 3-tomo mark on the neck of one of them. Then, Orochimaru stimulated the Cursed Seal, and the child had a black line pattern similar to that of Sasuke in the manga spreading on his body. As the black lines became denser, the child's chakra had more and more natural energy infused with it. With the help of the cursed mark, the child, who was previously losing, could easily overwhelm the other child he was fighting. "So what do you think, Ryo-kun? This not bad?" Orochimaru sounded rather proud. "Well, this effect looks very good. It's a pity that not everyone should be able to survive the toll of absorbing natural energy." Chapter 267. That's true indeed. The natural energy carried by the Cursed Seal is very deadly to the average child. However, once they're through the ordeal of accepting it, it would bring them a great increase in power, said Orochimaru with a smile. "Orochi-san, if it's convenient to you, can you show me the experimental data related to this experiment?" "Of course." Orochimaru went and brought a big scroll. Its contents made Ryo feel very uncomfortable. It mentioned that over a dozen children went through the experiment, and that only 2 survived. One of them was the one that Ryo just saw, and the other was Kimimaro. Ryo continued to read through the scroll and examine the child, noticing something different about the seal. There was no trace of Orochimaru's soul in this cursed seal. This meant that this new iteration of the cursed seal was simply a method to allow the wielder to utilize natural energy, and not a way for Orochimaru to revive himself. After going through the scroll, Ryo said, "This technique is really good. The only problem with it is the success rate. After all, not everyone could use natural energy. How can man get any stronger, Ryo? There's always a price to pay. Once one adapts to this cursed seal, they should at least double their strength," said Orochimaru, licking his lips. "That's indeed true. But Orochi-san, you're not showing me this technique just for me to appreciate it, are you?" Orochimaru's face showed a stiff smile and he embarrassedly said, "You've figured me out. Come on, how can I help you?" "Well, since you understood me, I'll cut straight to the chase, Ryo. I want to conduct this experiment on Lane." "Lane? No. Absolutely not." Ryo immediately refused Orochimaru's proposal. The latter wasn't angry. He understood Ryo's point of view and could not blame him for his stance, but still, he wasn't going to just give up. "Ryo-kun, come with me. I'll show you something, and if you still won't agree, I won't argue with you anymore." After saying that, Orochimaru took the lead and walked back into the lab, with Ryo following him after some hesitation. In the lab, the Sunin took out a white Zetsu arm, and then injected it with natural energy. The arm's reaction to natural energy was strange. It was like starving man at a feast, devouring it at an insane pace. Very quickly, the arm swelled, as if it was weightlifting, and the natural energy circulated within it along with its chakra. "See, Ryo-kun?" The first Hokage cells immediately absorb the natural energy, without showing any adverse side effects. As you can see, the power it holds increases dramatically. I've conducted this experiment many times, and Lane should be fine. Ryo looked at the arm in silence. Lane's cells were integrated with Hashirama's, and natural energy might indeed pose no threat to her. On top of that, Ryo had always been thinking that the next step in Lane's growth should be the blending of wood release and the sage mode, just like Hashirama did back in the day. He had long planned for her to go to Mount Myabuka to practice sage mode. However, this supposed safety was all based on the premise that Lane would react with natural energy as well as Hashirama did. "Orochi-san, I can't give you my word right now. I need to go home and check if Lane could indeed withstand natural energy. If that's the case, then I might let her take your cursed seal." Orochimaru nodded, knowing that he could get nothing more out of Ryo at the moment. After returning home, Ryo called Lane to his room that night. Looking at her solemnly, he said, "Lane, I have something I want to confirm, and I need your help." "Okay. How can I help you, Oni-san?" "Lane, you need to only sit still and let me expose you to this energy. I'm just checking how your body would integrate it." To make sure Lane remains safe, Ryo exposed her only to a trace amount of natural energy. Not leaning sage mode before, Lane could not sense natural energy, but her cells seemed to identify it at once, and her hands were unconsciously extended to hold Ryo's. The natural energy he released was instantly poured into her body, as Ryo anxiously observed her. After the natural energy entered her body, and of Lane's cells reacted to it, and in no time, it was merged with her chakra seamlessly. "Oni-san, you won't give me more? I like this strange power," Lane said grinning. Ryo breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that Lane indeed absorbed natural energy perfectly. "Lane, tomorrow, don't go with your team, Oni-san has somewhere to take you to." He smiled. "I see. Well, okay." The next day, after Ryo talked to Shisui, he took Lane to Orochimaru's base. "Lane. Long time no see." Orochimaru smiled and greeted Lane. Immediately the latter's face turned pale, and she unconsciously hid herself behind her brother. Apparently, the memories of what Orochimaru did to her were still vivid in her mind. "Lane, don't be afraid. This time, he won't do anything to you that you will not like, he is just going to give you a way to utilize yesterday's energy at will." Hearing about yesterday's energy, Lane's eyes turned bright, and her fear of Orochimaru dissipated slightly. Orochimaru then proceeded to plant the cursed seal on Lane. Ryo watched the process nervously, remembering how painful it was to Sasuke in the manga. A while passed, and Lane did not react. Ryo and Orochimaru looked at each other, and the latter activated his seal. What the two did not expect was that after the activation, the usual black lines of the cursed seal did not have time to spread on Lane's body. Immediately after they began to emerge, they dried up back into the three-tomo shape. "Oh Ni-san, the power in this thing is too little, it's hardly more than what you gave me yesterday." Lane pointed at the cursed seal on her neck. Seeing Lane's dissatisfaction, Orochimaru felt rather embarrassed. He did not expect that the natural energy within his seal would not be remotely enough to saturate her cells on first activation. "Cough, this power is not like food, Lane. You'll understand its effect once you try your wood release," Orochimaru reminded. A few moments later. Unfortunately, after only using 3 small wood release jutsus, the natural energy within Lane's body was exhausted. "Orochi-san, how long will it take until the natural energy in her body is replenished through the cursed seal?" Ryo whispered. "It shouldn't take long. To be honest, I'm not sure, this is the first time that anyone used up the energy in the seal." Ryo nodded and had no more questions. After promising Orochimaru of delivering data to him on Lane's progress, he returned to Konoha with her. Chapter 268. It's been a week since Orochimaru applied the seal on Lane. After observing her for that long, Ryo determined that the natural energy in her seal was taking a long time to be replenished every time that it's consumed. In fact, the replenishment was too slow for the cursed seal to be very reliable. However, after a week of use, Lane had a vague perception of outside natural energy, and this was enough to satisfy him. Ryo was already planning to get Lane to learn Sage Mode. Her being familiar with natural energy in advance could only be a good thing. At noon on the 7th day, Ryo went straight from the 3rd training ground to Ichiraku Ramen. "Uncle, 3 big bowls, packed." Toki was as fast as ever, and Ryo received his ramen in a short time. With the packed meals in hand, he teleported to Kushina's place. Knock knock. Opening the door was a young child, a little over 2 years old. He had the same blonde hair of Minato, blue eyes and 6 whisker marks on his cheeks. "Hello Naruto. Long time no see." Ryo entered and patted Naruto's hair. "Oh, it's Uncle. Mom, Uncle is here." Naruto ran into the room inside and shouted to his mother. Ryo shook his head helplessly and walked in. When Kushina heard that Ryo had arrived, she left what she was doing and walked out of the kitchen. "Ryo, what have been doing this week?" She sat down on the sofa in the living room. In the past 2 years, ever since Minato died, Ryo often visited Kushina's place to see her and Naruto. This past week, he was too busy observing Lane and he could not come. "I promised Orochi-san this thing and I had to finish it well. Naruto, I've brought you some ramen, dig in." Ryo pointed to the ramen on the coffee table. Hearing that, the boy's eyes shined. Like in the manga, Naruto loved his ramen. Kushina poured the ramen for him into a bowl, and he started eating happily. "Kushina Ni-san, where's Yin Kurama?" For over 2 years, the yin half of Kurama was living with Kushina and Naruto disguised as a relative Uzumaki. As for his true identity, that was decided to remain a secret by Ryo and Kushina, with only them and Naruto knowing about it. He left the day before yesterday, saying that it was for something related to the Ichibai and Nanabi. Ryo nodded and changed the topic. "Ni-san, how's Naruto been doing?" "Naruto is in a good state, and getting along well with Yang Kurama." Kushina never concealed Kurama's existence from Naruto, but also never opened the seal keeping his chakra from leaking into Naruto's body. This was because Naruto was now too young, and could not possibly bear the burden of utilizing the Kyuubi's chakra. Kurama was also understanding of the matter and never complained about it. After lunch, Ryo took Naruto out. Kids of his age were the most energetic, and Naruto wildly ran back and forth along the road all the time, with Ryo following him slowly. Along the way, Ryo noticed that Naruto only greeted people who smiled at him, ignoring those who were cold-faced or looking away. While children are innocent, they are also sensitive, and Naruto was actually saddened by the obvious fear and contempt those people had to him. Ryo knew that this was related to the leaking of the information about Naruto being the Jinchuriki 2 years ago. Even now, over half of the villagers still feared Kurama greatly, and regarded Naruto as his incarnation. Nevertheless, Konoha's villagers were not all the same. Some of them were just too grateful to the Yondame's sacrifice, and to them, Naruto was also a hero who had saved the village. "Naruto! Here, here!" Hearing someone shouting, Naruto stopped and looked back, finding Shikamaru and Koji. Seeing both of them, Naruto ran to them very happily, and Shikamaru whispered to him while looking carefully around, "Naruto, where's Ryo-san?" "Oh, he's right there. I mean there. He's gone." Hearing Shikamaru's question, Naruto looked behind him, just to find that Ryo was nowhere to be seen. Shikamaru and Koji breathed a sigh of relief. Both of them grew up listening to tales about the legendary Ryo Yamanaka, and that did make them rather intimidated by him. They always felt a bit uncomfortable in his presence. Those two brats. Ryo, who used the transformation jutsu to mix in with the villages, shook his head smiling. "Shikamaru, Koji, let's go and find Sakura," Naruto proposed to the two. "Naruto, Sakura doesn't like us, why should we look for her? It would be such a drag," Shikamaru complained. Koji also nodded in agreement. Not wanting his friends to be unhappy, Naruto could only give up on his idea. The three played together until the evening, when the parents of Shikamaru and Koji came to bring them home. Ryo was originally planning to accompany Naruto slowly to his place, but then suddenly he felt that Korin's natural energy in his body began to stir up abnormally. His face changed greatly, and he teleported with Naruto to Kushina's home before teleporting once again to the borders of the Fire Country. Ever since the Kyuubi's night, Korin had been practicing the Yamanaka techniques, hoping to control her body as soon as possible. This went on until 2 months ago, when her consciousness simply fell into deep sleep. Today, her power stirred suddenly. Did that mean that she was about to wake up? Ryo felt a little anxious as he opened up his bag for Korin to wake up in her ragdoll cat form. Sure enough, Korin opened up her eyes slowly. After looking around with some confusion, she jumped into Ryo's arms as soon as she saw him. "Ryo, I've succeeded. I can now control my power and complete body." "Really? That's great." Hearing Korin, Ryo was also very happy. Her being able to control her power meant that the next step in his plan could finally begin. Ryo's plan was to use Korin's power to simulate the six-path sage mode. Since the Kyuubi allowed Obito to do just that, it was reasonable to think that Korin would also have this ability. In fact, Ryo was not interested in becoming a six-path sage mode user. He has always been reliant on his trump card, his ice, and did not really interested in using other ways to get to the top of the world. However, the six-path sage mode was the strongest power ever seen in the shinobi world, and it was necessary for Ryo to study and understand it. For that purpose, he needed Korin's power. In the past 2 years, he has been learning to use yin and yang chakra more efficiently. He predicted that if he mastered their use, and then combined that with Korin's power, he should get on the right way. Once that's done, he could understand the Rikudo Senin's power, and this would be of great help to his future growth. Chapter 269. Truth-seeking balls are high-density entities composed of all attributes, yin-yang and the 5 elements. They usually take the shape of black spheres, although they can take other shapes and even combine. They have the power of all things, and upon hitting someone not endowed with the power of the 6 paths, they could send them into oblivion. Just thinking about this makes it clear, Ryo's idea was very dangerous. If he was to reproduce some of the effects of the 6-path sage mode without truly reaching it, the results might be catastrophic and it could end in his demise. Therefore, he wasn't going to act on it just yet. He needed to wait some more, wait for Naruto and Sasuke to grow up, so that he could extract traces of Ashura and Indra's chakra from them. With the power of both sons of the Rikudo Senin, he should have no problem dealing with the truth-seeking balls, or any other manifestation of the 6 paths powers. Ryo explained these thoughts to Korin, and after some thought, she was willing to cooperate with Ryo for this goal. With her by his side, he was more comfortable. Now, he only needed Naruto and Sasuke to grow up, and then find a way to awaken the powers of Ashura and Indra in them. As for Korin, as she had finally achieved her goal, he took her back to Konoha with him. In the evening, Chintz made a nice dinner to her children, as usual. Lane, who had a difficult day with her mission, and Ryo, who just got home, were both guided by their noses to the table. Korin could smell the rice, and her sniffing sounds could be heard out of Ryo's bag. The latter smiled, and he took her out to enjoy the food with his family. As soon as Lane saw Korin, her eyes went bright, for she had never seen a cat that's as cute. "Oni-san, is this cat yours?" "Well, her name is Korin." "Korin, say hi to Lane." "Hey little girl, hello." Wow! A talking cat! Lane's eyes got wider, and she became so excited about Korin, she directly went and held her in her arms. Lane, you need to eat your dinner. Chins couldn't stand watching her daughter ignoring the food. Lane pouted and put her tongue out, but she did reluctantly put Korin down and get back to her dinner. After the meal, she hurriedly helped Chins with the dish, and then ran to Ryo's room. The latter guessed why she came back to him, but Korin was no toy. After thinking about it, he took out Kajin's summoning contract. When Lane entered the room, he took her to the side quickly, and under her confusion, he made her a contractor of Kajin. Then, he taught her summoning, and with the only summoned beast of her being Kajin, she easily summoned her into the room. Looking at the stunningly beautiful silver falcon before her, Lane forget all about Korin, holding on to Kajin and not letting her go. Ryo hadn't seen his falcon for a while, and now, her body had grown a lot. He established a telepathic link with her, and told her that Lane was his sister, asking her to take care of her. Kajin obviously agreed and promised him to do just that. The next day, Lane flew to the place where Shisui told her Team 6 will be gathering. Izumi and Itachi came early as usual. Before the eyes of the two, Lane jumped from Kajin's back. Lane, what's that? It's so beautiful. Izumi pointed to Kajin, who was still in mid-air. She is the summoned beast that my brother had me have a contract with. Her name is Kajin. Kajin, get down here with us. Lane called Kajin down and introduced her teammates to her. Seeing the envious eyes of Itachi and Izumi, Lane's ego was satisfied. It was then that she decided that for any reason, she would not hesitate to get Kajin's help. Time flew, and before anyone knew, it was the winter of year 51. Perhaps it was because of his ice affinity, perhaps it was something else, but Ryo felt most comfortable in the winter, and especially liked snow. Knowing that Pakura would never witness such a sight in her hometown, he decided to bring her to see Konoha under the snow. Looking at the sliver-white world before her, Pakura was indeed very excited. All she ever saw in her country was the desert, and it was the first time she ever saw such sceneries in her life. Very quickly, she forgot all about the tension of being in a foreign country. After the two of them played in the snow for a while, Ryo put on the hat of a tour guide, taking his girl around the shops of Konoha. In order to avoid trouble, Pakura deliberately changed her appearance. As she went around the village, she realized that it was a very good decision. This was because when the villagers saw Ryo holding the hands of a strange woman, hanging around Konoha, they were all stunned, their eyes fixed on the two. Their gazes were far from easy to cope with, and Ryo's face rapidly turned red. After leaving the center of the village, there were far less people around the two, and Pakura was finally relieved. Ryo, those people's eyes are so terrible. She said with embarrassment. Oh, you mean the villagers? Well, that's probably because they never saw a girl around me. Hearing that answer, Pakura blinked, and then a bright smile of satisfaction appeared on her face. Without knowing, the two had their legs drive them into the woods, where the snow made the most beautiful of scenes. Pakura was just about to say something to Ryo, when she suddenly heard some noise in the distance. Ryo, there seems to be some trouble right there, let's check it out. Ryo released his mental power, and after a few moments, he smiled and said, well, let's go watch the hero save the princess. He was already holding Pakura's hand, and he teleported with her into the vicinity of the action. Now, that Konoha was completely covered in snow, Ryo could move freely all around the village. Hey! Why are three boys all bullying a little girl? Pakura asked angrily. That child will be fine. Keep quiet for now, my nephew should come out to save the beauty in distress at any moment. Your nephew? Are you talking about Uzumaki Naruto? Yes, I just sensed him nearby. Naruto is a good boy, he will not just let such a thing happen. Just as Ryo finished his words, Naruto actually rushed in and shouted to three bullies, quit it. Who's that? He's the kid that my mother told me not to play with. Oh. It's that kid. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, the future Hokage. Don't you forget it. After saying that, Naruto made his hand seals, and a clone identical to him appeared by his side. A clone? Is he a ninja? The three children were stunned by seeing Naruto using hand seals, but a non-living clone wasn't going to hold them back. They all gathered around him, and he was stomped. Ryo, why aren't you saving him? Seeing Naruto in such big trouble, Pakura could not stand the heart-wrenching scene unfolding before her eyes. It's alright. Kurama will help Naruto when time comes. It's just that now, some people in the village are upset about him. It seems like in the past 2 years, Ne-san and I have been too low-key. As he was speaking, Ryo could sense a group of ninjas coming through the woods. Pakura couldn't even hear Ryo clearly, being more concerned with Naruto's state as she watched him nervously. A few moments later, she watched a group of ninjas in charge of protecting Hinata coming out of the woods. Seeing adults approaching, the 3 rascals scattered quickly. The Hyuga ninjas picked up Hinata and were about to leave, but the young girl looked worriedly at Naruto and fell to the ground, struggling to get to him. Hinata-sama, what do you want to do? That child is a demon. What did you say about my family? The Hyuga clan seems to be getting confused. At that moment, Ryo and Pakura came out of the woods, hand in hand. This is a matter of the Hyuga clan, it's not wise to talk to a group of ninjas like. As the Hyuga who was speaking turned around, he realized he was speaking to Ryo Yamanaka. Immediately his face turned whiter than the snow around him. Ryo was too lazy to bother with scolding him further, and decided to take the matter to Hayashi himself. Chapter 270. The Hyuga ninjas who were responsible of the protection of Hinata returned to the clan's district to report to Hisashi. The ninja who spoke to Ryo didn't report straight to Hayashi, as had no right to go directly to the clan head's place. After Hisashi listened to the incident, his face turned very gloomy. He also realized the seriousness of the matter and rushed to Hayashi. Looking at the anxious look on his brother's face, Hayashi immediately realized that something bad had happened. It was obviously not trivial. And then, after listening to the story, he sat down, almost collapsing. A ninja of their clan had insulted both Ryo Yamanaka and Kushina Uzumaki. Hisashi, do you think we could just... Hayashi-sama, this time I'm afraid we can't hide. Ryo Yamanaka and Kushina Uzumaki could decimate our clan on their own. Worst of all, the current Hokage substitute would definitely stand on their side. Hisashi explained his thoughts. Hayashi sighed and said decadently, Hisashi, accompany me tomorrow to visit Ryo Yamanaka. Yes, Hayashi-sama. The next day, Lane had just finished breakfast and was ready to go out on a task when she met the Hyuga brothers on her way out. She blinked, and then rushed back inside saying, "Oh-ni-san, there are identical people outside." They were fast. "Don't worry Lane, I knew about them already. You can go, and your brother will handle this." "Okay, bye-bye." When he heard that the Hyuga brothers had arrived, Ryo cancelled his plans of going out. After a while, Inoichi arrived, and he sent someone to bring them in. Ryo moved to the living room, Inoichi by his side. The latter greeted the 2 brothers as they walked in, while Ryo glanced at them with a cold expression on his face. Just his gaze was enough to make the 2 brothers feel that blood was freezing in their veins. "Cough, Ryo, you're going out of line, the Hyuga clan head has come his with sincere intentions." Inoichi tried to warm up the mood. Taken by surprise, Ryo nodded, and then said, "I was just thinking of visiting the Hyuga's patriarch yesterday, and here he is today. Ryo-sama, today, we've come here especially to apologize. Yesterday, one of our clan spoke without thinking." "Is that so? I heard him saying that Naruto was demon. This was after Naruto interfered to save your patriarch's daughter, taking a beating for it. You're saying that he spoke without thinking? I think this is clearly how he felt." Hisashi did not know how to answer, and just stood in place, his face getting even gloomier. "So, I can understand that his feelings reflect your clan's attitude towards Naruto." No. This is just a misunderstanding, Ryo-sama. We are very respectful to the Yondaime and his son, and how they both saved Konoha from destruction. In that case, then you should let Naruto know how you feel. You and Hayashi Dano should be apologizing to Naruto, not me." After saying that, Ryo stood up and left. The Hyuga brothers looked at each other, letting out a sigh of relief. From what they just saw, they realized that Ryo's requirements were simple, and that he wasn't going to unleash his wrath upon their clan. Ryo did not want to make the Hyuga pay, he just wanted to make them, and by extension, all other clans, pay Naruto the respect he deserved. To put it bluntly, he just wanted to shake things up a little bit, fixing the village's perception of Naruto. The Hyuga just happened to be the clan to get in his way. The next morning, the 2 brothers visited Kushina's place. After taking an actual beating from her, they received Naruto's forgiveness. On the same day, a public statement was made by the Hokage clan. First, they apologized to Naruto, and then expressed their gratitude, making it clear that they have always respected him. The other families were oblivious to what was happening in the background. However, it was clear from the Hokage's actions that the top of the village was somewhat dissatisfied with Naruto's status. These clans had to live in the village for the foreseeable future, leaning in with the wind was their best option, and therefore, most families changed their inner teaching about Naruto, with him transforming from the demon of the village, to its hero. With this result, Ryo was satisfied, as Naruto should be getting less and less looks of contempt and fear as walks in the village. Indeed, things went like he anticipated, with the attitude of the Hokage and most other clans, along with civilians, changing drastically. For now, at least no one would openly show their disgust to Naruto, with those who could not shake their hatred to him just looking at him coldly and not doing anything else. Children are the most sensitive to emotion, and Naruto could obviously feel this partial change of attitude, and it just added to his smile and happiness. A few days after the Hokage's public apology, Ryo received a letter from Orochimaru, telling him that he had made a breakthrough in his cloning technology. Ryo went to the Sound Country immediately, and as soon as he arrived, Anko took him into the lab. "Ryo, let's keep any chatter for later, check this out." Orochimaru handed Ryo a copy of his recently recorded experimental data. Reading through it carefully more than one time, Ryo was getting more and more excited by the moment. This data recorded the results of Orochimaru's latest cloning experiment. The latest clone that he had made had been able to carry chakra, as well as produce its own. The only problem was the foreseeable lifespan of these clones. Orochimaru had noticed that the cells of this clone had their mitosis much faster than the cells of an average human. Therefore, they should also age much faster than a normal person. "Orochimaru-san, why do you think this is happening?" Orochimaru shook his head, as he also did not have an explanation. After considering all issues here and back in the village, Ryo decided to stay and work with Orochimaru, in order to perfect the cloning technology. Now, he was one step away from achieving true resurrection. The winter soon passed, and the spring of year 52 came without anyone realizing it. All this time, Ryo had been working with Orochimaru. It was a shame that the two still failed in solving the problem of fast mitosis. However, being the men of science they did not give up, continuing to bury their heads in their experiments. Far away, in the Cloud Village, after over 4 years since the end of the Third Shinobi World War, the village was prosperous once again, with all traces of destruction brought by Ryo gone. Under the leadership of the Fourth Hokage, the ninjas in the village were also working hard and practicing, hoping to protect the village better next time. At this time, in the Hokage's office, A was looking at a scroll on his desk with excitement. It was sent by a spy in Konoha, confirming that a certain clan head in village had a 3-year-old daughter. "Dode, summon all elders of the village for a meeting immediately." After 4 years of lying down, the Hidden Cloud were finally making their next move. Chapter 271. In the Hokage's conference room, the elders of the Hidden Cloud gathered. "Hokage-sama, why did you bring us in so suddenly?" asked a middle-aged clan head. "Here's the deal, I have just received a message from a spy of ours that's lurking in Konoha, confirming that the Hokage clan head has a 3-year-old child." Excitement immediately showed on everyone's faces upon hearing the info. "Hokage-sama, when should we make a move? We should take out time. First, I have to confirm that Ryo Yamanaka is outside the village. His perception abilities can be too much of a threat to any action we might take. It would be difficult for our plan to be successful with him around." A answered. "Ryo Yamanaka? He is indeed a problem," said an elder, sighing. "Hokage-sama, if we make sure that Ryo Yamanaka is away from Konoha, will you make the spy perform the task? This could save us time and logistics, as well as take Konoha by surprise." Another elder suggested. "No. The spy who sent the information is only good at hiding and tracking. It would be impossible for him to manage to steal away the young Hokage from her clan and then from the village." A refused the suggestion. "In that case, we can only send someone else. However, we must hurry up. In the last war, how many casualties did we suffer just because of those damn Hokage? We must get the Byakugan." Hearing this elder speak, other clan heads agreed, "Yes. We must get the Byakugan." A few days later, the Fourth Hokage received another message from his spy, confirming that Ryo Yamanaka was out of Konoha. A was overjoyed when receiving the news, and he once again gathered the elders. As soon as he read the scroll to them, all the elders began to urge him to act as soon as possible. In the afternoon of the same day, the Hokage selected a Jonin and 5 Chunins to form a small team, and they were all put under the leadership of the head ninja of the village. Then, he sent a scroll to Konoha, notifying them of the team's arrival for negotiations to improve the relationship between the two villages. In Konoha, Sakumo looked at the message frowning. Konoha and the Hidden Cloud weren't on the best of terms, so this sudden move of the Hokage made Sakumo suspicious. Go and call the third. While you're at it, check if Ryo Yamanaka has returned. If he's in the village, call him here as well. Sakumo said to the Umbu behind him. After a short while, the Umbu returned with the third, letting Sakumo know that Ryo hadn't come back yet. Sandame, I have just received a letter from the fourth Hokage. As he said that, Sakumo handed the scroll to the third. After the latter read through it, he asked him, "What do you think, Sandame?" After some thought, the third answered in a serious tone, "The relationship between us and the Hidden Cloud has never been really that harmonious. With the fourth Hokage sending people to communicate, he certainly has some hidden purpose." Sakumo nodded, as he thought the same. "Sakumo, I suggest that when the Cloud's team arrives, your Umbu should keep them under close surveillance. If necessary, recruit more support to them from the Hyoga and Aberme clans. Well, I will mobilize my Umbu. For the time being, I won't disturb the Hyoga and the Aberme. If the Umbu find out something, I'll get their help to get to the bottom of it." The third agreed with Sakumo's thoughts, and a few days later, the Cloud's team arrived to Konoha, and Sakumo sent Shisui and Kakashi to meet them. Seeing the 7-man team, with the 2 Jonins leading the way, Shisui whispered to Kakashi, "It's quite the lineup they have sent." Indeed. The Hidden Cloud must have some hidden purpose behind this. "We must be careful, Shisui." "Kakashi-san, you can rest assured, we'll have no problem," Shisui said confidently. The team's leader had a few words with Kakashi and Shisui, before the two arranged for them to stay in a hotel at Konoha's center. The Umbu were already hiding near the hotel, prepared to constantly monitor these Cloud ninjas. For 3 days, the Cloud ninjas did not do anything suspicious, and the Umbu gradually relaxed their vigilance. On the 4th night, the team returned from the Hokage's office after a meeting. Under the eyes of the Umbu, they returned to the hotel, and remained in their rooms making no suspicious moves, as usual. However, what the Umbu did not realize was that the head ninja of the Cloud village had already been replaced by the Cloud spy lurking in Konoha, with the latter using the transformation jutsu. Starting on the 5th day, the head ninja began watching the activities of Hayashi and Hinata in silence, remaining on the edge of the village when possible and disguising himself as a civilian. After 2 days of observing Hayashi and Hinata's patterns, his plan begun. First, he killed the Hyoga ninja responsible of protecting the child, and then disguised himself as him. He kept following Hinata, until she reached an area where she was alone. Immediately, he stepped in, stunning her unconscious, and then taking her to the forest of death. Before going there, he made a signal that notified his companions at the hotel of his success. As soon as they noticed the sign, the team knew that the Hyoga child was caught. In order to not grab any unnecessary attention, they did not rush to leave, pretending that nothing had happened, and remaining in the village. However, what the Cloud ninja did not anticipate was that Konoha would strengthen their patrols and defense because of their arrival. In the afternoon, a patrol found the body of the ninja responsible of protecting the young Hinata. Upon seeing it, Sakumo immediately made the decision to close all exits of the village. By now, he had already guessed the purpose behind the Cloud's negotiations, so he made sure that they would not be able to take Hinata away. Sakumo's commands were quickly passed the Uchiha's police department, and the entire village went into the emergency state. The Cloud head ninja pretended to be a civilian with his sleeping child, trying to leave Konoha, but he was blocked. After learning that his daughter had been kidnapped, Hayashi was extremely anxious, deploying the entirety of his clan's forces to aid the Umbu in their search for her. The Hyoga clan head's daughter going missing was no trivial matter. All available ninjas in the village also joined the search, including many of those around the hotel. At the hotel, the Cloud team obviously noticed things were abnormal in Konoha, and they immediately realized that they might have been exposed. After discussion, they made a new emergency plan, and the spy lurking with them left the hotel, taking advantage of the now lax surveillance on them. On the other side, with their Byakugan, the Hyuga quickly located the spy who was hiding in the Forest of Death. Hayashi was notified even before Sakumo, and he came personally to the scene, killing the Cloud's head ninja with his own hands, and recovering his daughter. As the corpse of the head ninja was delivered to Sakumo, he went straight to the hotel, his face gloomy. "I believe you owe me an explanation." "What explanation?" "Our captain realized that there was an accident going on in Konoha, and went out to help you out. Now, he is dead. You are the ones who have to explain themselves, Konoha. You must hand over the murderer at once." The remaining jonin in the team answered Sakumo according to the emergency plan. Sakumo did not expect such an answer from the team. He was furious for a moment, but then he regained his composure, asking, "Can your village afford going to war against us?" Chapter 272. After several years of training and recovery, the Hidden Cloud regained a lot of their military strength. On top of that, Orochimaru had been expelled from Konoha, and Ryo was not in the village. Thinking of that, the Cloud Jonin answered without fear, "If you do not hand over the murderer, we will be ready to fight." Sakumo laughed in anger. Did the Cloud really think that Konoha was that vulnerable now? Since he became the substitute Hokage, his white blade had not tasted blood. Today, the Cloud's team had the privilege of being the first in years to see the true White Fang. In the hotel, only a flicker of white chakra was seen, before 5 of the Cloud ninjas fell into a pool of their own blood. Only one Chunin was left, trembling as he watched Sakumo slaughter his companions. "Say this to you Hokage, if you want war, bring it on. Now, take the corpses of your companions, and get the hell out of Konoha." The remaining Chunin sealed the corpses in the room, and then escaped Konoha as fast as he could. Immediately spread the truth of what had happened in the village. "I want the villagers to know the true ugly face of the Hidden Cloud," said Sakumo to the Umbu on his side. The Umbu were all dispatched, and soon, the entirety of Konoha knew what the Cloud had done. For a while, both the villagers and the ninjas were agitated. The Hyuga were at the center of this whirlpool of debates, and they were frightened by the news that the Hidden Cloud were willing to go so far. Before, Hayashi had been rather dissatisfied with Sakumo being in office, not liking his way of managing things around the village. Today however, he realized that it was extremely fortunate that the third wasn't the current Hokage. If it was the third in charge, he would have most likely sacrificed the Hyuga's clan head or his tun for the peace of the village. But now, Sakumo's strong will and stubbornness saved the clan from a very complicated fate. After a long silence, he ordered his clan to follow Sakumo's orders, and prepare for war. As for the third himself, he frowned and his face went gloomy as he heard the news, as Sakumo did not hesitate to wage war as soon as he was challenged. As he received the news, he was chatting with his old mate, Koharu. To his surprise, she was very supportive of Sakumo's choice. The third did not expect that she would, with her always advocating for peace. Full of doubts, he stared at her in awe. Seeing his expression, Koharu smiled and said, "Hiruzen, if we don't stand strong this time, more and more villages will take us for granted. And so what if we go to war against the Hidden Cloud? We will definitely win. I'm not worried about being defeated. I just can't bear the idea of dragging the villagers of Konoha into war again." "You can't bear that, but you can bear the thought of surrendering a fellow Hyuga? They are from Konoha as well, you know. I know we've gotten old, Hiruzen, but your heart should not get that old." Listening to Koharu, Hiruzen was stunned, blinking at first, before a smile appeared on his face. "I understand. Koharu, let's go to Sakumo together." At Sakumo's office, the third and Koharu both uncharacteristically supported this war. Sakumo was very curious about what could have caused the two to suddenly change their attitude, but he did not ask them, instead screaming at his Umbu to gather all the higher-ups in the village for a high-level war meeting. Later, in the conference room. The news had already been spread, and no one in the meeting needed to be informed of the situation. Sakumo looked at the serious looks on everyone's faces, and he said directly, "Things must be clear to everyone, if the Cloud won't back down, I'm going straight to war." Sakumo-sama's decision has out full support. "Our clan is at the center of this, and once the war starts, we will give out all to support you." Hayashi was the first to stand up. "The Uchiha clan agrees." With the matter related to a fellow clan of Konoha, Fugaku did not hesitate, in another bizarre agreement with the Hyuga. "As for our clans, we shall advance and retreat with the Sandaime." Shikaku Nara spoke on behalf of the Inoshikacho alliance. The representative of the Sarutobi clan glanced at the third, who immediately stood up and said, I don't want war, but the hidden cloud were the aggressors. On behalf of my clan, I agree. As soon as his voice fell, Koharu stood up saying, I agree as well. With the third and an elder counselor both giving their support, no one else had any more reasons to disagree. The war had a unanimous approval in the village, and Konoha entered the war preparation phase. A few days later, the surviving Cloud Chunin finally reached his village, delivering Sakumo's message to the fourth Hokage. If there was someone more hot-headed than Sakumo, it would definitely be A. Immediately, he summoned over 20,000 ninjas, and went straight to Konoha's borders. Meanwhile, in a cold lab in the peaceful Sound Country, Ryo was oblivious to all of this. By now, his cloning experiments with Orochimaru had reached a critical point. After several months of trials, the two finally managed to solve the fast mitosis problem that their clones had. To their surprise, the two realized that the problem was due to the lack of consciousness that the clones had. The clones had only physical energy, and whatever chakra they produced was comprised of only that. This led to an excessive loss in cell vitality, which made the bodies increase the speed of their divisions to compensate. Now, the clones that they made retained a hint of conscious, just enough for them to have spiritual power, and not enough to interfere with soul transfer. This was enough to ensure that the clones would not have such fast cellular division during the chakra extraction experiment. After some testing, the two finally succeeded in creating the first Orochimaru clone. The clone's physical condition was maintained perfectly at that of a 20-years-old Orochimaru. In fact, upon further inspection, Orochimaru confirmed that the clone was in better condition than he was when he was 20 years old, perhaps because it didn't have to suffer all the trials that his own body had to go through. Obviously, Orochimaru was very excited, for now, he knew that he successfully achieved his purpose, and that he could finally realize his dream of eternal life. Immediately, he wanted to transfer his soul to this clone, but then, Ryo stopped him. With this clone being the first one to be completed, couldn't there be any hidden dangers? Neither of them knew, and Ryo couldn't let Orochimaru try on himself, and didn't even need to, for he had better options at the moment. He took out a small bottle he had been storing in a scroll. In the small glass bottle was what seemed to be a blood sample that was protected and preserved with natural energy. Although the blood was frozen, the nucleuses of the cells were not damaged. This blood was Yahiko's. When Ryo last went to the Rain Country, he promised Nagato and Konan that he would resurrect him. He left off with this small bottle of blood, which now found its perfect use. Ryo gave the bottle to Orochimaru, asking him to make a clone with the blood inside it. Orochimaru nodded. He knew that this was an experimental product made by Ryo. If the clone made with this blood could be integrated perfectly with the soul of its owner, it would mean that Orochimaru would really be able to achieve eternal life for himself. The process of making an adult clone took about a month. With both of them being very familiar with the process, Ryo could rely on Orochimaru to make the clone on his own, so he decided to return to Konoha. In the afternoon, after Orochimaru began to make a clone of Yahiko, Ryo said to him, Orochi-san, I have been away from Konoha for several months, and I need to go back there and see how things are going. Orochimaru nodded, and he didn't say anything. After leaving the lab and taking a shower, Ryo immediately moved back to the Yamanaka district. Chapter 273. As soon as Ryo returned, he felt that there was something wrong with his clan. Everyone's faces were gloomy, and they all seemed to be in a hurry. Is there something wrong with the clan? Ryo wondered, before quickly teleporting to Inoichi's side. At this time, Inoichi was on the front line with Shikaku and Choza, and all three had been discussing tactics for a while. Naturally, Ryo's sudden appearance in their tent made them both surprised and delighted. Ryo! You're finally back, said Inoichi with excitement. Looking at the costumes of all three, Ryo frowned, and immediately released his mental power to perceive the surroundings. A military camp. What happened? Who are we going to fight? Asked Ryo after finding out that he was in a military camp. Our opponent is the Cloud Village. While you were away, Shikaku gave Ryo a concise narration of what had happened. As Ryo listened to Shikaku, he suddenly remembered the incident that happened in the manga. It was what caused Niji to lose his father. Now however, it seemed like Konoha had made a completely different choice. After understanding the general situation, Ryo decided to go see Sakumo. Inoichi and I-san, I'm going to find Sakumo-san. You carry on. After finishing his words, Ryo disappeared. Just like Inoichi, Shikaku, and Choza, the third, Sakumo and Kushina were also discussing how to face the cage tiers of the hidden cloud in the main tent. Sandaime, we'll hand over the Nibi to you. I'll deal with the Reikage. As for the Haxabi, Kushina should be able to cope with him. The third and Sakumo thought that Kushina had one half of the Kyuubi left in her body. To them, Kurama was so strong, even his half should be able to deal easily with the Haxabi. Upon hearing this arrangement, Kushina immediately discussed the matter with the small Kyuubi in her body. This small Kurama was originally a soul shard and a tael's worth of chakra left by Kurama behind in Kushina's body in order to preserve her life. It was Korin that turned him into what he was now. Although the small Kyuubi had the same yin and yang properties as the complete Kurama, the amount of chakra remaining in him was too small, somewhere between that of the Yanbai and the Gobei. Fortunately, in the past years, Kushina had also gotten a lot stronger. It might be a little difficult for them to cooperate to actually defeat the Haxabi, but they would have absolutely no problem dragging it down. After hearing small Kurama, Kushina sighed and just wanted to agree, when suddenly, a familiar voice could be heard in the tent, "Ne-san, you stay here and take care of Naruto, I leave the Haxabi to me." Hearing Ryo's voice, Kushina turned around and smiled happily. The third and Sakumo were also delighted to see Ryo, breathing a sigh of relief. With Ryo back with them, their victory was certain. "Ryo, where have you been all this time?" asked Kushina with concern. Ryo hesitated for a moment, and then smiled, saying nothing. While resurrecting Minato was almost certain, accidents could still happen. If that was to occur, it would crush Kushina's heart. Therefore, Ryo decided to conceal the matter, for now. Upon seeing the expression on Ryo's face, Sakumo could guess what he had been doing, and he also smiled, saying nothing. "Well, it's no time for guessing games. We're about to go into war, let's discuss our problems with the enemy for now." "Ryo, you have said that you will deal with the Haxabi, are you confident?" asked the third. "Don't worry, Sandaime-sama. I have this new technique, and I can't wait to try it on the Haxabi," Ryo replied. "Since that's the case, then we will redistribute. I will deal with the Reikage, the third will deal with the Nibi, and the Haxabi will be left for you. As for Kushina, just like Ryo said, you protect Naruto," said Sakumo. Everyone was very satisfied with this arrangement, and they agreed. In the Hidden Clouds camp, no one knew about Ryo's return, and A was actually optimistic about his village's odds, mainly thinking about what compensation he shall demand from Konoha after victory. The next day, the fourth Reikage ordered his troops to attack. The Hyoga and Aberame ninjas near Konoha's camp had been monitoring the surrounding dynamics, and they immediately noticed the clouds attack. The news immediately reached Konoha's camp, and their shinobi who were ready to engage in battle were immediately dispatched. The two sides met in the woods on the border of the Fire Country. A and Killer B were the first to rush into Konoha's ranks, like the behemoths they were. Sakumo and Ryo looked ahead, and immediately located their opponents. Using his signature Acrobat 7 Swords style, Killer B began harvesting lives. Ryo activated his Mangekyo to enhance his Ice Lightning Chakram mode. As soon as Killer B showed an opening, he popped up in front of him and kicked him far and away. After going through a few trees, B managed to stop. "Who's the one who kicked me? You've actually dared to attack the Killer B? Bakayero Konoyero." B made his strange rhymes again. "It's me. You're actually as tough as they say, B, not being hurt by that kick." Ryo Yamanaka. The Haxabi was shocked upon seeing Ryo. "This place is too small, I can't fight you well here. You're going with me, B." After finishing his words, Ryo immediately flickered to B's side, teleporting with him to the desert of the Wind Country. The change of the surrounding scenery made B stunned for a while. Fortunately, the Haxabi in his body told him, "Ryo Yamanaka has used some space-time ninjutsu to bring us here." Space-time ninjutsu? He's really annoying, this Bakayero, Konoyero. Okay, this is spacious enough. Let's have fun. On the other side of the battlefield, with his white blade shining bright, Sakumo was colliding with A's Lightning Chakram mode. Sakumo also had his clan's style of the Lightning Chakram mode, granting him the speed of the Reikage's style, but with more emphasis on offense. As for A, he had inherited his style from his father, gaining great defensive and speed abilities with Lightning Chakram mode armor. The battle between the two was a lot like a confrontation between a spear and a shield. Unfortunately, the two were just too fast for those around them to even witness their great battle. In comparison, the 3rds battle against Yujito Nii was much simpler and cruder. While he was far from his peak, the third wasn't having a problem dealing with this opponent. At the beginning of the fight, he summoned Inma, who immediately used transformation, adamantine staff, turning into a extending and expanding staff that is as hard as adamantine. The third waved his massive staff, which expanded as it moved, taking Yujito Nii in her full Biju mode by surprise and slamming her. The Nibi's body is similar to that of a cat, and was very agile. However, no matter how much Yujito Nii tried to dodge, the 3rds staff could always land. Chapter 274. Facing the fourth Hokage, Sakumo was having a slight edge. The third was also putting the Nibi under pressure, but on the whole, Konoha did have an advantage over the hidden cloud. Konoha's main force lied mainly in its various clan prodigies with their clan-exclusive techniques. Their ordinary ninja were not as powerful as the average cloud ninjas. On top of that, the hidden cloud had learned from the lessons of the Third Shinobi World War. In the past few years, they worked harder than the victors and therefore, besides the very top battles, they were pushing Konoha back. The third was rather anxious watching the battle. He did not expect that in just a few years, the hidden cloud would get that much stronger. However, Sakumo was very calm in comparison. This gap existed before between the cloud and Konoha's ninjas, but Konoha's clan specialists could compensate for that back then. Yes, the cloud were now stronger than before, but they were not likely to beat Konoha's lower ranks in a short time. With this dragging on as much as it's supposed to, the battle would end as soon as Ryo or the third end their fights, which would inevitably push the cloud to surrender. Sakumo was better fighter than A. But while the latter wasn't as powerful as the third Hokage, he was faster, which prevented the White Fang from being able to beat him. In the Wind Country's desert, Ryo was violently giving B a beating. Between his ice teleportation and his Mangekyo enhanced ice lightning chakra mode, the Hakusebi's Jinchuriki could not even touch Ryo, passively getting beat. With him yet another time falling to the ground, the Hakusebi could no longer stand it. "We can't go on like this, let's fight together." Hearing his Biju, Killer B looked at Ryo who was distant from him. Although his pride made him want to go on, he knew that he couldn't cope with Ryo. "Alright, let's teach him a lesson, this Bakayero Konoyero." After saying that, B's body oozed with red chakra. "Oh, you can't take this anymore." Ryo smiled as he watched Killer B's body being wrapped with the Hakusebi's chakra. In no time, the bull-headed octopus body monster appeared in front of Ryo. Immediately, he launched a Biju Dama at him. Over the course of the past few years, Ryo's became much more proficient with the teleportation barrier technique. Dealing with a Biju Dama was no problem to him. Just like Minato teleported the Juobi's attack in the past, Ryo sent Jayaki's Biju Dama into a different part of the desert. The Hakusebi did not expect that Ryo would actually do such a thing, thinking that such a feat could only be pulled off by Minato. "Hey cow, are you ready? Next, it's my turn." As soon as Jayaki heard Ryo saying that, he rushed at him wildly, but when he felt natural energy gathering around him, the beast wanted to escape. Killer B had not practiced Sage Mode, but the two had been working together for so many years, having a very strong connection. While B did not sense the energy around Ryo, he could sense Jayaki's fear clearly. "What's wrong? Leave and I'll explain to you." After finishing his words, Jayaki wrapped his tails around him, and then rotated, creating a massive dust cloud in the desert and pushing himself away. "So anxious to go? I have a present prepared for you." The Hakusebi heard Ryo's voice ringing in his ears from the distance, and then felt a bitter chill, finding himself already inside the ice world. "Is this genjutsu? What kind of an illusion is this?" the Hakusebi quickly asked B. No, this should be the real world." Jayaki fell to silence. All he knew was that he felt an abrupt gathering of natural energy around Ryo, but he did not expect him to go this far, creating such a terrifying thing. "Hakusebi, Ryo Yamanaka should have just transferred us again." "No, it's not that. We're still in the same place. The sand around us is frozen, and the desert floor could be seen through the ice on the ground." Hearing Jayaki, Killer B was stunned. Freezing such a large area of the desert in an instant was beyond his imagination. At this time, Ryo who was hidden in the ice restored the chakra he had just lost with Korin's help. This was a technique that took Ryo over 2 years to complete. Ever since the Kyuubi's night, he had been trying to awaken Susanoo, but unfortunately, he never managed to even sense it. Instead, because of his frequent use of his Mangekyo, he discovered a hidden function of his ice world. The ice world was somewhere between Genjutsu and reality, closer to the Kamui world than it was to the Tsukuyomi. He could store things inside this world, or even let living people come in. But what was really special, was that it could absorb his ice from the outside world. Whatever ice is absorbed from there would quickly assimilated by ice world. After being assimilated, it wouldn't just be part of it, but it could also be sent back out. However, even when sent back out to the outside world, this assimilated ice would still be connected to ice world. With these properties, Ryo could actually create an ice world outside, trapping what couldn't be usually trapped by the ice world, such as the Biju. Just for differentiation's sake, Ryo called the original technique Ice World, and the new one the World of Ice. With Korin's help, Ryo's chakra was quickly recovered. By then, Jayaki had begun to try crushing the ice around him. However, no matter how hard he tried, the ice would just be repaired, as it was linked to Ryo's spiritual power and Korin's natural energy. As long as Ryo's and Korin's powers were not exhausted, the world was indestructible. In this space filled with ice, Ryo reigned supreme and had absolute control. Immediately, he controlled some of the ice to form a massive fist, one that was directly aimed at the Hakubi. In panic, Jayaki dodged it, but to his surprise, as he jumped to the left, he was met by an attack from an ice creature that looked exactly like him. He became a little confused for a while Ryo just enjoyed himself more and more, controlling the ice into all sorts of shapes. Being one of the strongest Biju, Jayaki put up a good fight, but the storm of Ryo's attacks was still too much for him to take, especially with all the attacks containing natural energy. Soon, the Biju's nose became swollen, and a few minutes later, he completely lost consciousness. B left his Biju state, and he was left on his own staring at the ice world around him. Ryo smiled, teleporting behind B while making an ice pan, with which he knocked him unconscious. Then, he pulled his ice back into his ice world, and then teleported with Killer B instantly to the battlefield. Chapter 275. In the forest on the borders of the Fire Country, the battle between Konoha and the Cloud was getting intense. Konoha's ordinary ninjas were losing ground, and the third was getting more and more anxious, wanting to beat the Nibi as fast as possible to support his ninjas. Sakumo was obviously in the same position, but the fourth Hokage was not foolish enough to let him have his way. He knew that as long as he, Yujito Nii and Killer B held their ground, the hidden cloud would emerge victorious. Therefore, he and Yujito Nii were stalling as much as possible. With both being extremely fast and agile, they were doing just well enough to avoid being beat. Whenever the third would give up on fighting Matatabi to help his troops, the beast would always rush at him in time, keeping him from doing anything. Damn it! Sakumo, we can't go on like this. Let's send someone to bring Kushina from the camp, the third said. Sakumo nodded, as now only Kushina could help them indeed. As A and Yujito Nii heard Kushina's name, they looked at each other awkwardly. Raikage-sama, didn't you say that the only Kage-tier ninjas currently present in Konoha are Sakumo, the third Hokage and Kushina the Kyubi Jinchuriki? If Kushina is still in the camp, who is B-sama fighting? I have no idea, but no matter who they are, they could never beat B. We just need to beat Konoha's troops quickly before Kushina arrives, and we'd still win. Is that so, eh? I haven't seen you for a few years, but you're still the same arrogant man you've always been. Hearing this familiar voice, A's face froze, and he slowly turned around to find Ryo carrying B. Ryo Yamanaka? It's actually you. How are you here? The fourth Hokage face changed as he asked Ryo. How am I? Not great, but I could be doing better at any moment. Smirking, Ryo placed Killer B on the ground, gathering an ice blade in his hand and putting it against his neck. You bastard! Can you even stand against me to actually threaten me? Stand against you? Do you think you have the strength to overcome the Hakubi in its full form? A, when have you become so arrogant? A's face became more and more gloomy. Ryo beating the complete Jayaki was feat that even he couldn't pull off, and beating a perfect Hakubi Jinchuriki in his fully transformed state was something that even his father might have not been able to pull off. What do you want, Ryo Yamanaka? What do you think I want? Is that skull of yours empty? Or do you just not care about B's life and you're fooling around? As Ryo spoke, his blade scratched B's throat. Immediately, A screamed, "Calm down." When Yujito Nii saw the expression on A's face at this moment, she knew that the war was lost. Although the fourth Hokage and Killer B were not blood-related, the tie between the two was stronger than that of blood brothers. On top of that, Killer B was effectively the Hidden Cloud's strongest force. With him losing to Ryo, the Cloud had already lost. Seeing that A could not utter the words, Yujito Nii sighed and shouted to the Cloud's troops, "Hidden Cloud, retreat!" Hearing her voice, everyone turned around to Yujito Nii. When they saw Killer B on the ground unconscious with a blade on his neck, they all lost their fighting spirit. The Hakubi was their own Biju, and no one knew his strength better than them. With B losing, they lost as well. Sakumo here took the opportunity to say, "Stop the fighting, Konoha's shinobi. We've won." Konoha's ninjas heard Sakumo's command and stopped attacking as well, and both sides took their wounded and went on their ways to their respective camps. "Are you satisfied now, Ryo Yamanaka? Now, give me B." "Well, of course not. Once you pay, you'll get Killer B back." "Sakumo-san, I'll hand over the rest for you." Ryo teleported with B to Konoha. After staring at Sakumo fiercely, A retreated with the rest of his troops. Back in Konoha's camp, Ryo called Kushina. Together with her, they sealed Jayaki, preventing B from utilizing his power. Initially, Kushina also wanted to seal B's chakra, but Ryo stopped her. The fact is, Ryo was still a big fan of the manga's B. Moreover, with the latter having no access to his Biju's chakra, he couldn't possibly afford to make trouble. A few hours later, Sakumo and the third led their triumphant army of Konoha's ninja, and everyone had a night full of joy. The next day, the Hidden Cloud sent an ambassador to negotiate with Konoha. Over the course of the next few days, Ryo and Killer B talked things out, getting along very well. Soon, they became good friends. After negotiating, Konoha and the Hidden Cloud reached a consensus and signed a peace treaty. Killer B then reluctantly bid farewell to Ryo. Before leaving, he invited the latter to go to the Hidden Cloud to find him. Ryo did not hesitate and promised him to do so, saying that he would definitely visit him in the future. With that, Killer B left with peace of mind. Just as Konoha's troops were ready to evacuate their camp, Sakumo received information from the Hidden Sand. While Konoha were in battle against the Cloud, Onaki also wanted to have a slice of the pie, leading his troops to directly attack the village. All of this was noticed by the Sand, and against the common opinion in her village, Pakaro led her village's shinobi to intercept the hidden rock. Obviously, Raza was practically forced to join her. The two sides fought in the desert for several days and were still in a deadlock. Sakumo quickly held a meeting about a matter, in which Ryo immediately volunteered to go, as soon as he heard Pakara's name. Sakumo felt that Ryo's eagerness was rather strange. Ryo would usually act calmly facing such situations, never being eager to act unless absolutely needed. What was different this time? However, no matter what the case was, what Ryo suggested was definitely the best option. Both Sakumo and the third agreed that he was the most optimal support for the Sand. Ryo immediately prepared a platoon of 1,000 of Konoha's shinobi, supplementing their ranks with his personal medical team to support the Sand. However, the troops were to be too slow. Ryo decided to hand the command over the platoon to Uchihamon, while he teleported directly to Pakara. At this time, the latter was with Raza in the main tent, discussing their next move. Ryo suddenly appeared, startling the Hokage. As for Pakara, she had grown used to Ryo's ghost appearances. Seeing Raza on Pakara's side, Ryo said with a serious face, "Hokage-sama, I'm here on behalf of Konoha to thank the Hidden Sand. We have dealt with the Hidden Cloud already, and the Hokage had sent me to help you deal with the Hidden Rock." As soon as Raza heard that, a big smile showed on his face. Ryo's words showed well that Konoha appreciated their gesture, which was to be beneficial for the Hidden Sand. "There's no need for thanks, we are allies and we are supposed to help each other. I just want to know how many men were sent with you." 1,000, Chunin and above, and my own medical team." Raza was overjoyed, never expecting Konoha to go so big with their support. "That's great. During the past few days, we've had too many injuries on the battlefield, so the medical team is coming right on time." Here, Ryo scratched his head in embarrassment. "Well, about that, Hokage-sama, I directly teleported here as ordered by the Hokage, and the medical team is still behind." Hearing that, Raza's joy faded from his face, and he left the tent. Chapter 276. With the unwanted man leaving the tent, Ryo smiled and walked to Pakura, embracing her tightly. She did not struggle at all, just her face was blank. After the two kissed, they both returned to business. Pakura, who's the leader of the Rocks camp right now? Who else? It's Onaki. But the old man is really strong. Just yesterday, Raza fought him and lost, very badly. Haha. Well, I know you might not want to hear this, but Raza is the weakest of all the Kage. Onaki, however, after the death of the third Hokage, is probably the strongest of the third generation Kages. It's obvious that he would win that matchup. Pakura was somewhat shocked. She had always thought that Hiruzen was the strongest of the third generation Kages. Ryo saw her face and understood her thoughts, so he added explaining, if the third Hokage was 10 years younger, it would be a draw between him and Onaki. But now, the strongest is definitely the latter. 10 years younger? The third Hokage had gotten that much weaker because of age. Well, he's not just old physically, his heart is old. Ryo remembered what the third had to endure in recent years, and he sighed in sympathy. Well, Pakura, let's not waste time comparing old geezers, let's. Pakura-sama. Paku, cough. Pakura-sama, what are you? Just as Ryo moved his hand naughtily around Pakura, a sand ninja suddenly broke in. Pakura's face turned red, and she immediately pushed Ryo away. Speak up. What brings you here? Well, Pakura-sama, Onaki has led his troops to attack again, and Yondaime-sama has asked for you. The ninja wiped the surprise off his face, answering respectfully. Okay, I'm coming right away. About what you just. He saw nothing. Pakura, you don't have to worry. As he finished his words, Ryo activated his Mangekyo, and the ninja who delivered the message looked confused, and then he just left. Pakura opened her mouth, but then said nothing. In the end, she just sighed. Well, let's go. Okay. Ryo and Pakura went out of the tent, finding that the sand troops all gathered in the middle of the camp, waiting for their consultant. When she arrived, Raza ordered the troops to go to the front line, and then said to Pakura and Ryo, we just received intel about Onaki bringing the Goba's Jinchuriki into this battle to take us in one fell swoop. We have no one here that can deal with the Goba. Ryo Yamanaka, can you help us contain it? Yes, absolutely. Just leave him to me. Ryo happily agreed. Hearing Ryo, Raza felt relieved. A few minutes later, the two forces met midway between the camps. Immediately, ninjas of both sides directly collided, while Onaki floated in mid-air to locate Raza and Pakura. Kaze Kage-sama, that old man Onaki is looking for you. Ryo pointed to the sky. Upon seeing Onaki in mid-air, Raza was already red-eyed, gathering gold under his feet to suspend himself in mid-air. That's possible. Ryo's eyes shined bright upon seeing what Raza did. If gold could help one fly, why wouldn't ice? He was about to try it out, when suddenly, from the middle of the battlefield, he could sense the powerful chakra of a Biju suddenly surging. The Gobi is actually here. Korin, are you interested in playing with him this time? Ryo asked Korin, who was in his large backpack. Nah, not interested, that Gobi is too weak. If it was the complete Kurama, I might have considered it. Korin answered lazily. You know, if you keep being this inactive, you'll sooner or later get fat. Then I'll be fat. Korin did not let Ryo's provocation get to her. Ryo sighed helplessly, and then took her out of the backpack, handing her over to Pakura. Well, since you're not willing to deal with the Gobe, then I'll be leaving you with the task of protecting Pakura. Okay. Korin did not give much attention to Ryo's words, just moving around to find a comfortable position in Pakura's arms to continue sleeping. Pakura, I'll be back before you know it. Ryo's voice just fell, and he disappeared. By the time Ryo reached him, Han was in perfect Jinchuriki mode, raging in the crowd. The air around the desert is relatively dry, and Ryo should not be able to gather enough water from it to make anything substantial. To use his ice, he had to use water release. Biju are extremely sensitive to natural energy fluctuations. When Ryo used his Korin's energy to make water for his ice, he was immediately discovered by the Gobe. Both the beast and Han were extremely shocked to see him. With Konoha in war against the hidden cloud, why would Ryo Yamanaka be here? Still having his doubts, Han just decided to condense a Biju Dama and attack. Seeing the incoming Biju Dama, the sand ninjas panicked and fled, but deep down in their hearts, they knew they couldn't possibly outrun the attack. Being that this was an allied village, and most importantly, the village of his girlfriend, Ryo did not hesitate to use his teleportation barrier technique to send the Biju Dama away. Space-time ninjutsu. After Minato Namikaze, there are still people who could transfer an actual Biju Dama. The Goba looked shocked and worried, not expecting Ryo's mastery of the space-time ninjutsu to have reached such a strong level. Kokyo, I know you've missed me, but you don't have to be so enthusiastic. Welcoming me directly with a Biju Dama. Yet. You cut my tail the last time we met. You thought I'd forget so soon. Ryo's face became red, and thinking back of what he did to create Korin and help her grow, he know that he did every Biju besides Kurama wrong. Ryo Yamanaka, what brings you here? Shouldn't you be dealing with the hidden cloud on the borders of your country? Instead of the Gobas, Ryo heard a rough male voice. It seems that you're not up to date in the hidden rock. We've dealt with the cloud a long time ago. The matter was no secret, and Ryo directly told Han. What? That's impossible. We've coordinated with the cloud. Those bastards. Did they want us to take a loss as well? Ryo felt that Han's words were not coherent, but it seemed like the rock and the cloud were not acting on their own after all, and that there was some sort of deal between them. However, this was not important. The most important thing now was to deal with the Gobi as fast as possible. At this thought, Ryo transformed the ice around him into an ice dragon, and then controlled it to fly towards the Gobi. The two beasts collided, and Ryo immediately smiled. As the two were wrestling, the ice dragon was getting smaller and smaller. However, the flow of the Goba's chakra was getting slower, as if it was being frozen. By the time the Biju realized that there was something wrong and wanted to get out of the entanglement, it was too late. If it was to avoid making contact with the ice dragon, its chakra wouldn't be frozen, but the Goba chose to attack with confidence, and now, it couldn't even move fast enough to flee. As the ice dragon continued to get smaller, the Biju's movements continued to get slower. By the time the ice dragon disappeared, Kokyo completely froze in place. Ryo teleported to the beast, patting its head, smiling and saying, I did cut your tail before. For that, I'm sorry. This time, I will spare your life, and with that, we will be even. After saying that, Ryo teleported with the Goba to the borders of the Earth country, and then turned around and left. Chapter 277. With the Gobi away from the battlefield, Ryo killed a few of the Hidden Rocks ninjas, before using summoning to bring Gamahiro to the battlefield. With the warrior Toad on their side, the sand ninjas who already had the advantage of the battlefield found themselves having a great edge over their opponents, and soon, the rock ninjas were defeated. There was another battle, however, one taking place in midair between the Raza and Onaki. Like every time, the Kazekage was the one losing, but Onaki's face showed some pain. Raza did manage to take him off guard at some point, and he could hit his vulnerable back this time around. Upon looking down, Onaki's face showed even more pain at the sight of his troops being crushed. Looking around, he did not find the Gobi. When noticing that, he was shocked, and ordered his troops to retreat. In the Rocks camp, Onaki's face was gloomy, as he had just received news from his troops about the Gobi being frozen by Ryo and sent somewhere unknown. How come Ryo Yamanaka is here? How about the hidden cloud? Did we get no news from them? Onaki was in rage. Tsuchikage-sama, I think we have been deceived by the hidden cloud, and that they left us on our own, not informing us of their defeat. I believe they would want us to suffer more losses just like they did at the hands of Konoha, said a rock jonin. Those bastards! We've lost this time, and we could only retreat, said Onaki helplessly. But, Tsuchikage-sama, what should we do about Han? We'll send a few tracking ninjas around to try to locate him. But for now, we must retreat. Otherwise, if the rest of Konoha follows Ryo Yamanaka, we might not walk out of this battlefield alive. Yes, Tsuchikage-sama. I will immediately inform the troops. After the jonin left, Onaki sat on the ground and sighed, it seems that I have really gotten too old. In the afternoon, the hidden rock began to retreat. Upon receiving the news, Ryo promised Raza of giving the sand a part of the cloud's compensations as expression of Konoha's gratitude. Now that all threats were gone, the sand had no more reasons to stay in the desert. The next morning, Raza took his troops back to the sand village. Pakura, however, joined Ryo, along with the 1,000 ninjas platoon and his medical team that arrived late to the battlefield. All went back to Konoha, and she was with them as representative of the sand to receive their share of the compensations. After reaching the village, Ryo took her with him to directly meet Sakumo. There, he immediately proposed to give the sand a share, and Sakumo, who was already glad that the village came out of this ordeal relatively unscathed, agreed immediately. Ryo's proposal was to actually benefit Konoha, as it would solidify its relationship with the hidden sand. When hearing Sakumo's response, Pakura was also overjoyed, as this should greatly benefit her village as well. Over the course of the next few days, Ryo took Pakura around the Fire Country to have some good fun until the reception of the Cloud's compensations was completed. The fun came to an end however, when Sakumo finished dividing the compensations, and dispatched a small Umbu team to accompany Pakura to the sand and deliver their share to Raza. This whole deal took over half a month, and Ryo did not sense the time passing. By now, Orochimaru should have already completed making Yahiko's clone. Upon remembering this, Ryo teleported to the Sound Country. When he entered the lab, he saw Yahiko lying on a bed. "Ryo-kun, you came right in time. I've just finished making this clone." Upon examining the clone, Ryo was very satisfied. "Ryo-kun, if I remember correctly, this kid should be the one from the Rain Country, one of that idiot's 3 disciples he had there. It is him indeed. I didn't expect that you would remember him after so many years, Orochi-san. I just felt he was familiar." "Well, Ryo-kun, we should start experimenting." Ryo nodded, and his consciousness entered the ice world. Yahiko had been sleeping in his igloo for over 4 years now. After Ryo awakened his soul, he found that his last memories were of the day on which he fell asleep. After giving Yahiko a brief explanation of the situation, Ryo taught him the secret of Orochimaru's living corpse reincarnation. The technique, while hard to come up with, wasn't complicated in concept. However, it required a great level of control over one's soul. Nevertheless, with Yahiko remaining in soul state for so long, this was no problem for him. Therefore, he quickly mastered this technique. The next step was the most important. Yahiko had to use living corpse reincarnation to control his soul into his new body. Yahiko was already dead, his soul could be preserved in the ice world, but Ryo feared that something might happen to it as soon as he went outside. Therefore, he specially reminded him of using the technique as soon as he reached the outside world. Seeing the serious expression on Ryo's face, Yahiko solemnly nodded. After taking a deep breath, Ryo took Yahiko's soul out of the ice world. When out, Ryo lent some of his chakra to Yahiko, which allowed him to use living corpse reincarnation, and control his soul into the clone safely. The clone was identical to Yahiko's original body, which made it have an affinity to his soul. Very quickly his soul was merged with the new body, and the clone which had its eyes closed was finally awakened. However, just like Ryo feared, there was something wrong. Although Yahiko's soul was integrated with his new body, he couldn't control it at all. Besides opening and closing his eyes, he couldn't even move a finger. Immediately, Ryo began to examine Yahiko with his Mangekyo, just to find nothing wrong with his body's neural system. Ryo then established a telepathic link with him and asked, "Yahiko, how do you feel now?" "I can feel my body, but I can't control it." After some though, Ryo condensed an ice scalpel saying, "Yahiko, I'll be conducting some experiments on you, and you tell me how you feel." After finishing his words, Ryo proceeded to cutting the skin on Yahiko's hand. "It hurts." "Ryo, you're cutting too deep." Yahiko immediately complained. "Too much." Sorry. Ryo turned the ice scalpel into a small ice hammer and very gently tapped Yahiko's knee. "I feel no pain." As he said that, Yahiko kicked forward. Ryo stopped the experiment and he frowned. Yahiko's senses and reflexes were normal. Why wouldn't he be able to control his body? "Ryo, could it be that this body is too old for my soul?" "Too old? What do you mean?" Ryo asked. "Well, yet. I have been dead for 4 years, and this body seems to be over 20 years old. I wasn't that old when I died. Could that be the reason?" Yahiko's words made Ryo realize, Yahiko's soul's age, or in other words, his spiritual power, was not enough. He had been relying on Ryo's ice world to maintain his existence for so long. Perhaps the whole deal was lack in spiritual power. Ryo called Korin, and the two together supplemented Yahiko's soul with spiritual power. Obviously, she was somewhat dissatisfied with this, as her power was being harvested by one person after the other, and she grew uncomfortable with giving it away. However, looking at the anxious look on Ryo's face, she could only cooperate with him. With their help, Yahiko's spiritual power gradually grew, and he slowly became able of controlling his body. After his hands and feet became flexible, Ryo and Korin stopped the process. Chapter 278. A few days after his resurrection, and with the help of Ryo and Korin's spiritual power, Yahiko could perfectly control his new body. Still, Ryo kept getting surprises. Unlike Orochimaru when using living corpse reincarnation in the manga, Yahiko did not get his strength from before the operation. Now, he had to practice from scratch. Fortunately, his new body was even healthier than his old one, and Yahiko still held his memories of all that he had learned before, so he should just need some time to get to his past strength, and beyond. More days went by, and Orochimaru confirmed that there was nothing wrong with Yahiko besides the dip in his strength. This made him extremely excited. Orochimaru's main purpose was to learn everything. If he achieved eternal life, why would he be complaining about having to take a few years with every new body to get back as strong as before? Therefore, he immediately began preparing his own clones. As for Ryo, he returned to Konoha's after Yahiko's resurrection. Now, Naruto was over 3 years old, and with his Uzumaki blood and being Ashura's reincarnation, Ryo felt it was suitable for him to start learning how to extract his chakra. Kushina also thought the same as Ryo. To her, Naruto was, above anything, Minato's son, and she believed in his talent. Therefore, on the same day of his return, Ryo took Naruto to the third training ground, preparing to teach him how to extract his chakra. The young boy however was completely uninterested in this. This surprised Ryo greatly, as being able to control one's own chakra was a skill that no one else wouldn't want in this world. Ryo wanted to get to the bottom of the matter, so he took Naruto to Ichiraku. Under the temptation of the bowl of ramen, Naruto explained everything. It turned out that the young boy had been in contact with Kurama, and things were greatly different this time from what they were like in the manga. Now that Kurama was already friends with his mother, he would occasionally talk to Naruto about some issues related to chakra and battle. The most powerful of the Biju, even when halved, would often say, "Don't hesitate, whenever you need chakra, you can ask me, whenever context called for it." Back when he saved Hinata, Naruto actually used this chakra to make his clone. Therefore, young Naruto thought that with such an abundance of chakra at his disposal, he had no need to practice refining his own. After knowing the reason behind Naruto's awkward behavior, Ryo looked helpless, never expecting Kurama to actually do such a thing. When Naruto finished his food, Ryo let himself into his consciousness. Kurama had naturally heard the conversation that took place between Naruto and Ryo. Noticing Ryo's reaction, he just faked being asleep as the latter approached him. "No need to fake it, Kurama. I don't blame you. We all want to protect Naruto, so I came here to ask you to promise me something. Unless Naruto is in a very dangerous situation, do not lend him chakra." The Kyuubi opened his eyes and said, "I'll keep that in mind. Kurama, you must promise me this." This is not just about Naruto refusing to learn how to extract his own chakra, it's about the fact that your chakra has the potential of overwhelming him with negative emotions. I've had those negative emotions under control when I gave Naruto chakra last time, it won't affect him. The Kyuubi explained. Although your control of these negative emotions is protecting Naruto for now, if he keeps relying on your chakra, they could accumulate. That, along with him being too reliant on you, cannot be good for his growth. Kurama remained silent, understanding that Ryo was right. So, Kurama, from now on, lend Naruto as little as possible of your power from now on. When he grows up as a person and as a ninja, you can let him have all your strength, just like with Kushina before. The Kyuubi nodded, finally reaching a consensus with Ryo. With that done, the latter's consciousness left Naruto's mind. With the ramen finished, Ryo took him to the third training ground. Instead of walking or teleporting there, this time, he used Raza's trick to fly with him to their destination. "Hey uncle, teach me this please. Flying like this, so cool." Naruto stared at Ryo with envy. "To learn such techniques, you must first learn how to refine your chakra." "I said I have Kurama, I don't need to. You try and see if Kurama would lend you his chakra." Ryo interrupted Naruto with a smile. Naruto immediately tried to communicate with his Biju, but obviously with no success. So, are you now willing to learn to refine chakra with me? Naruto nodded bitterly, and began to learn with Ryo. Having the Uzumaki blood, Ryo was immediately able to extract his own chakra after learning the method. Ryo, who thought previously that this process went fast for him, realized that he holds no candle to young Naruto. In the following week, Naruto kept refining his chakra under supervision of Ryo and Kushina, until its amount stopped growing. How does he have so little chakra? Kushina muttered after perceiving her son's chakra. That's little. Ne-san, Naruto has as much chakra as a Takubutsu Jonin despite his young age. What more do you want? Naruto is an Uzumaki. For our clan, he's just average for his age. You know. I was hoping for more. These words hit Ryo like a sack of bricks, hurting his pride. Still, he could now further appreciate how horrifying the Uzumaki clan truly was. In the manga, teen Naruto had a 100 times as much chakra as Kakashi. Ryo never expected that much to be average for an Uzumaki. This made him also understand why the Uzumaki clan was almost annihilated as well. With so much chakra, they were a clear threat to most people in this world, a threat that needed to be eliminated. Ryo shook his head, chasing these thoughts out. This matter happened long ago, and now he didn't need to focus on that. He only needed to have the peace of mind to teach Naruto and get him to his strongest. After the chakra refinement was completed, Ryo gave Naruto a chakra induction paper. Just like the manga, Naruto only had wind release affinity. Ryo did not care about this, as training should help expand his affinities. He only gave Naruto this paper to confirm the direction he had in mind for training him. Naruto was very interested in ninjutsu, but he was unfortunately too young for it to be suiting to teach him too many of them. Therefore, Ryo only taught him AC class jutsu as first, letting the child practice slowly. With his current chakra stores, it was clear that Naruto was most suitable to being a ninjutsu-type ninja. However, the child was also Minato's son. While he might not be the next Yellow Flash, Ryo had to make sure that speed would not be his weakness. Therefore, Ryo decided to slowly teach Naruto wind release, and then use that as basis to passing on Shisui's style of body flicker to him. Chapter 279. Ryo kept teaching Naruto, while he himself kept practicing as well. Without realizing it, half a year passed this way. Yesterday, Naruto had his 4th birthday. In the past 6 months, Ryo had taught him a good basis for wind release, and a bit about the body flicker jutsu. While it was rather expected, it was still a pity that the body flicker was a bit too much for Naruto at his age. After spending a lot of time and effort, he still didn't manage to grasp its basics. However, Ryo was not in a hurry. The most dangerous events should still be far into the future in case they were to happen, and Naruto was still young, and he should learn faster as he grows up. Another major event happened around Ryo, as Team 6 participated in the Chunin exam. Lane and Itachi became Chunins smoothly, while Izumi failed the exam for some reason. With Itachi becoming a Chunin, he left the team and, under Shisui's recommendation, he took his teacher's place in Kakashi's Umbu team. Lane on the other hand took what was recorded of Hashirama's jutsu from Ryo and often practiced in the Forest of Death on her own. With his other 2 disciples finding their own ways, Shisui often took Izumi out on missions with him. However, just a few days ago, he asked her not to accompany them, as he went together with some companions of his from the Umbu to perform a secret mission for Sakumo. A few days later, he returned, seriously injured. As for his old companions, they all fell in the line of duty. Hearing the news, Ryo directly teleported to the Sakumo's office. Obviously, the latter knew that Ryo would come to him to understand the situation. Before neither of them spoke, he actually handed him a scroll recording the details of Shisui's task. Ryo opened the scroll, and after reading it, his face changed greatly. He put down the scroll and said, "Sakumo-san, this matter should be classified as an S-class secret. No one in the village should tamper with it again. Otherwise, things could turn south fast." Sakumo rarely saw Ryo so serious, and immediately realized how important the matter was. "Ryo, is there anything special about that place?" "What is it?" "Sakumo-san, please don't ask. I don't know how to explain it now." Fully trusting Ryo, Sakumo did not ask. Following his recommendation, he classified the matter as an S-class secret. In the evening, Shisui was awakened by Ryo treatment. As soon as he woke up, he remembered the scenes of his old companions, the ones he grew up with, dying to save his own life. Pain overtook him, and as it intensified, his eyes were stimulated. His 3 tomo kept spinning in his eyes, eventually turning into a pair of windmill-like patterns. Shisui's Mangekyo was finally awakened. This consumed a lot of Shisui's spiritual power. He was already weakened because of his injuries, so he immediately fainted. On the second day, when Ryo checked on Shisui again, he found out that his spiritual power was close to bottoming out. Thinking of the enemy that Shisui had probably faced, Ryo was very nervous about the situation, and decided to temporarily move into the hospital to make it easier for himself to observe his student's state. For 2 days and 3 nights, Shisui remained in this state. On the 4th day, he finally woke up. As he opened his eyes, he found Ryo sitting by his side. As he slowly opened his eyes, his sensei could see his large windmill-shaped pupils. Mangekyo. Shisui, you've opened your eyes. Ryo was surprised, but at the same time, relieved. The Mangekyo's development explained the dip in Shisui's spiritual energy. At least, it didn't seem to be the result of his fight. Shisui heard Ryo's words, and then unconsciously reached for his eyes with his fingers. Ryo smiled, condensing an ice mirror for his student. Only as Shisui looked in the mirror did he finally see his Mangekyo. Sensei, Don't worry, don't say anything. Let me take a look at your wounds first. Shisui hesitated, but he said nothing more. After a few days of treatment, his spiritual power got back close to normal, and Ryo cleared him out of the hospital. On the night on which he left, he sat down with Ryo, explaining his experience to him. Ryo gradually pieced what he remembered with Shisui's narrative, and he became more and more convinced of his previous speculation. However, he said nothing about this to Shisui, instead chatting with him about the Mangekyo. Shisui's Mangekyo was incredibly powerful, yielding the ability to alter one's thoughts without being noticed, effectively changing them into a completely different person. This was Kota Amatsukami, the most powerful genjutsu. In the manga, because of these eyes' terrible ability, too many people coveted them, which caused all sorts of trouble to Shisui. But for now, it seemed like his Mangekyo ability was still awakening. Sensei, why can't I feel my eyes' ability? Shisui also realized that his Mangekyo wasn't active yet. Don't worry about it. It will appear when you need it later. Was it the same for you, Sensei? Well, yeah. Ryo nodded, but he knew that this was different. Ryo's abilities were there for him immediately, but Kota Amatsukami was different. On top of this, Ryo could also feel the difference in his Sharingan's ability immediately as it was activated. All things set aside, Shisui felt relieved when he heard Ryo's reply. Then, he started asking Ryo about using the Mangekyo, to benefit from his experience. Without any reservations, Ryo passed on his experience of a few years with the Mangekyo to Shisui, telling him about many of its secrets. When learning that the overuse of this eye could get a man blind, Shisui was shocked. However, thinking of how Ryo didn't seem to be losing his sight after using his own Mangekyo so frequently for so many years, he concluded that his sensei might have found a way to counter this hidden risk. At this thought, Shisui asked carefully, Sensei, do you have a way to preserve your sight when using the Mangekyo? Ryo smiled and nodded, ensuring to Shisui that he as well won't have to suffer from this side effect when using his own Mangekyo. Back in the day, Ryo acquired Kagami Uchiha's Sharingan from Orochimaru. Although his eyes did not turn into Mangekyo, they did complete a part of the evolution. Ryo estimated that these eyes would be enough to prevent Kagami's grandson, Shisui, from ever going blind. As for it evolving into a true eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, he was not sure. Moreover, even if Kagami's Sharingan failed to protect Shisui's Mangekyo, Ryo could always go for transplanting Hashirama's cells into his body. In the next few days, under Ryo's guidance, Shisui began to learn using the power of his Mangekyo. Everything about Shisui's Sharingan had improved a lot with it transforming into a Mangekyo. Even without using its main ability, he was definitely quasi-Kage tier. Shisui was very happy about Shisui's growth. In this world, with all the trouble they might end up facing, the stronger he is, the better. Chapter 280. Ever since Shisui activated his Mangekyo, things between him and Ryo returned to how they were back when they were teacher and disciple. Ryo, being so busy with teaching him how to utilize his dojutsu, forgot all about teaching Naruto for a while. However, what he did not expect was that the young Naruto would actually make some inexplicable substantial progress with the body flicker jutsu. A week later, Shisui became rather skillful with utilizing his Mangekyo. As for protecting it from going blind, Ryo promised him to deal with that later. Before leaving, Shisui hesitated for a long time, and then finally decided to ask Ryo, "Sensei, about the opening of my Mangekyo, I would prefer it if isn't exposed to anyone else for now." "Why?" Ryo asked with interest. "I want to leave it as an ace up my sleeve. I've been around you for so long, and I understand a lot of things. Like you said before, there are things that we need to be prepared to." Ryo looked at his apprentice with surprise, and then smiled and nodded. With Shisui leaving, the third training ground had now two people frequently training in it, Ryo and Naruto. With the latter making no small progress on his body flicker, Ryo prepared to teach him the next stage. On one evening, Ryo returned home, just to find Inoichi waiting for him. "Ryo, you're back. Inoichi has been waiting for you for a long time," Chin said to her son. "Yes, Mom. Inoichi and I-san, is there anything?" "Yes. Yesterday, Shikaku and Choza came to talk to me about the 16th generation of the Ino Shikacho." "The 16th generation? You mean Ino, Shikamaru, and Koji?" Ryo immediately had the image of Team 10 and their sensei, Asuma. "Well, the three have grown up together and they have a rather tacit understanding. So, we've been discussing their growth, and we want you to give them some guidance." "Is that possible?" "Yes. Right now, I'm just teaching Naruto, so they can come over. But you know, it will all be just basics." "Of course. For now, they will still be focused on practicing their family's secrets." Hearing Ryo agree, Inoichi was delighted. The next day, Ryo made a special trip to the Nara and Akamiki households to take Shikamaru and Koji along with him. In the third training ground, looking at the three boys and the little girl in front of him, Ryo had a headache. The three boys already had a good relationship, but Ino didn't get along well with them, just giving them a nasty glare from time to time. Shikamaru had long been accustomed to this. However, Naruto and Koji were more sensitive, staring at Ino from time to time. Ryo could feel the tension in the group. Kids today are really a hassle to deal with. He scratched his head and sighed. If these kids carried on like this, they would not be able to make much progress. Thinking about this, Ryo said, "Ino, do you not like them three?" "Well, uncle, I don't want to see them." "Can you drive them away?" "Okay, I can do that, but you have to master the clan's secret you've been working on, and use it within a cooperation tactic with Koji and Shikamaru. If you do that, I'll send them away." In order to temporarily calm the situation, Ryo could only take this path. After Ino considered the matter for a while, she nodded and agreed, and ran to the side to sit down and begin training. "You two, you've just heard me. If you fall behind Ino, you'll have to go home." "Then I'll just go home then. Training like this every day is such a drag," Shikamaru muttered. "Shikamaru, you can get me to send you home indeed, but then you'd have to deal with your father." The thought seemed to shake Shikamaru, but then he regained his composure. While his mouth muttered, "Such a drag," his body had already begun to train. As for Koji, he had always been very well behaved. When seeing that his pals were already practicing, he also started accumulating his chakra. The three clans of the Ino Shikacho were known for their secret tactics and cooperation, and ironically, the promise of them not having to work together was the only way that Ryo could find to get them to do just that. As for Naruto, his mastery of the basic body flicker was not bad. Now, Ryo had begun to teach him how to use that in conjunction with wind release. The child was really too young for this, and no matter how hard Ryo tried to explain these matters to him, Naruto would just look at him dumbfounded. Realizing that Naruto wasn't going to understand him anytime soon, Naruto decided to teach him more about wind release, and incorporate Shisui's flicker into a more long-term plan. Like this, a month passed. Under pressure, the Ino Shikacho trio made some good progress. Trying to drive the other three away, Ino was practicing hard. As for Shikamaru, he didn't want to deal with his father scolding him, so he did the same. The Nara clan was a clan of extremely smart individuals, with Kid Shikamaru himself having an IQ of over 200 in the manga. With such wits, his early progress at this stage of training that didn't rely too much on chakra was much faster than most. Overall, he was rather talented. As for Ino and Koji, they practiced their clan's secret jutsu for a month, but their progress was slower than Shikamaru's. Still, compared to how they were progressing before, they've been doing great. As the previous generation of Ino Shikacho watched their children making faster and faster progress, they felt that they had made a wise choice, handing them over to Ryo. Besides the progress made by the children, there was also progress made by Orochimaru during this month. One day, Ryo received a message from him, and he immediately teleported to his lab. Orochimaru had made all his preparations before Ryo arrived. As soon as his friend was in the lab, he began changing bodies. The clone prepared by Orochimaru was identical to his own body, but quite younger. The transfer was smooth, which was to be expected. However, the surprise was that Orochimaru took along with him all his chakra to his new body. With no lack of spiritual power or chakra, Orochimaru had no trouble moving his body, and no dip in power. In fact, because this new body of his was younger, Ryo could sense a slight boost in his power. Moving his limbs around, Orochimaru was extremely satisfied with his new body as he sensed that he was in his 20s again. And sensing the chakra in his body, he appeared rather surprised. He thought that things would go for him as they did for Yahiko, and that his strength would drop substantially. Therefore, he invited Ryo to help him and make sure that he doesn't end up being hurt through this experiment. But against his expectations, his power moved along with his soul to his new body. Orochimaru stared excitedly at Ryo, licking his lips. The latter knew exactly what he wanted, so he went with him to the base's training ground. After some fights, Orochimaru found that his power level did not decrease. However, because his control over this body wasn't perfect yet, he couldn't exert all his strength.